Good afternoon and welcome to the January 16th, 2024 workshop. We have some very exciting topics today to discuss, and we'll be starting out with organizational excellence overview. And Superintendent Connor, if you'd like to introduce us to this agenda item.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, board members. I am excited about the three topics that are on our agenda for the work session today. We're going to start out talking about a proposal that we have been working with the Studer Group in terms of how do we bring ourselves to reach our goals through an organizational excellence customer service mindset. And so we are going to share a high-level overview with you and then get some questions answered and clarifications and some direction as we move forward to further the conversation around how we build this and permeate a culture and a mindset of customer service throughout this organization, not only in our operational division, but across all departments and divisions. Secondly, we're going to move into an academic focused conversation around a lot of the work that has transpired since my arrival in July. We call it the Focus Framework for Advancing School Performance, and we will have an in-depth conversation about what has been accomplished up to this point and what will be accomplished moving forward as we move ahead. And then lastly, this board has been very interested in highly prioritizing literacy within our district. And so we want to share with you a plan for where we've been, what we've found, and where we're headed in terms of improving the literacy outcomes for all of our students. So looking forward to the topic and the discussion today. I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Chris Renoff, our Chief of Staff, and Mr. Jody Dumas, who is our Chief Operational Officer, to talk about our first topic, organizational excellence.
Thank you, Superintendent Connor. Good afternoon. It is, as you've heard me say before, it is great to come before you. We look forward to the opportunity to go ahead. Mr. Dumas and I would like to take the opportunity to share a brief, and it is brief, high level, and I kind of say setting the stage overview of a concept that we're exploring for consideration as we embark on a refreshing or a reimagining of our district strategic plan. Some of you may be familiar with the concept of organizational excellence from previous work done under the leadership of Superintendent Wilma Hamilton in partnership with the Studer Group and Sarasota Memorial Hospital. Today, I think we all agree that it's not good enough for organizations to be good. Collectively, I know, I've heard from each and every one of you and our superintendent, that we all want and expect the Sarasota County School District to be a leader in the state as well as across this nation. And for those who want to be the best in the market, excellence must be the goal. Organizational excellence, for those who aren't familiar with the term, refers to the state of exceptional performance and consistency, hardwiring, that is the term that they frequently use, in all aspects of the organization, including culture, leadership, strategy, people, processes, and most of all, results. It is a state of continuous improvement where the organization strives for excellence in everything it does, and where every member of the organization is engaged and empowered to achieve excellence to satisfy and exceed all stakeholders' expectations. For the purpose of this presentation, we've narrowed the focus from organizational excellence to operational excellence and service excellence in the Business and Operations Division of the Sarasota County School District. Why a focus on operation and service excellence? Well, as the numbers suggest, nearly half of the district's workforce is in the business, finance, and operations side of the house. Significant time, as Superintendent Connor just mentioned, and you will hear shortly after this presentation, significant time, energy, effort and expertise is being invested on the instructional and academic side of the house. You're excited, and you should be, with what you're going to hear following this presentation. But that being said, on the business, the finance, and the operation side of the house, we also strive to be focused and accountable to achieve outcomes that provide high efficiency and effective operations, provide exceptional customer and stakeholder service, and hardwire conditions for student, school, district, and community success. In order to achieve the level of success we expect in Sarasota County, we must work interdependently in support of our school teams, all students, and all families to maximize the success throughout the entire organization. Slides 3, 4, and 5, as Mr. Dumas passes through those, you have them in your packet. The research is clear. A focus on culture, relationships, systems, processes, and ultimately results is the key. We're searching for a solution, and here's the other piece, alternative funding sources, so we don't have to pay for it. That is more than just customer service. It's truly about a transformation of culture and climate here in Sarasota County. One that engages and empowers all of our people, teaches and coaches our leaders with research-based tools and tactics, aligns and hardwires systems and practices so stakeholders' experiences of excellence happen every time and not chance by chance. It also embeds reflection and recovery. As Stephen Covey says, it allows us to sharpen our saw and get better every time. We're looking for a solution that also assesses our current reality, is grounded in measurable progress, and tells us very clearly when and how we've arrived at the outcomes that we've set forth. Organizational excellence starts with leadership. It becomes hardwired, and then it cascades down throughout the entire organization. Organizations achieve excellence when our leaders do three things: create the right goals with the right accountability and the right leadership development. They apply the right approach for managing individual performance, and they select the right processes, tools, and tactics to accelerate the continuous improvement process. The evidence-based leadership framework that was on the previous slide, along with the 9 principles for organizational excellence, work together to create a synergy that can produce both an optimal work environment and culture, but seamlessly hardwire strategies to achieve excellent and sustained results. With that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Dumas to elaborate on how and why the exploration of a potential investment in organizational excellence and the framework accompanied could truly permeate, transform, and impact all facets of our amazing school district.
Well, thank you, Chris. It's absolutely my pleasure to come before you and also have the opportunity to talk about organizational excellence. To me, as you look at operations, I think Mr. Renoff is exactly correct. I think we do a lot of things very, very well, but we don't do everything to the level that we could do that. And over the last few years, how do we get there is what we've been striving for. How do we get that done? And to me, there needs to be some kind of a facilitator to get us there, to get us into that process. So, for example, when we talk about how does it work on a daily basis, I think we've done a very good job of setting goals in each operational department that align to strategic plan. But what we haven't done a good job of is driving those goals down into each level of the organization. So if I am a food service worker at Sarasota Middle on the line every day, I understand what the goals of my department are and how they relate to the goals of the organization. I think those are some of the areas that we could really focus on to drive further development. This is really a people-based approach, and we're investing in our people at all levels in the organization, from leaders on down to frontline workers, to understand what does it mean to be part of this organization, what does it mean to provide that level of customer service, and how do I contribute to that? How am I important in that role and that vision? That's what we've lacked in the last few years that I think this program really focuses on. So it's starting at the top, making sure we're training leaders. It's cascading all of those strategic goals, the core values as we standardize across departments down to all levels in the organization. It's aligning expectations so that no matter what department you're in, you're executing seamlessly across the district, providing that service level for everybody. And then at the end of the day, it is really looking back at what did we say we were going to do, how well are we doing at it, measuring it, and then coming back and adjusting from there. I think those are the key things moving forward that'll push us in the right direction as we continue to move through organizational excellence. So as you look at this next slide, this is, and some of you have been around a while, we've been talking about this. These are not concepts that are hard to understand, but they're hard to hardwire because we get so busy every day in every department doing the work of the day that we don't spend time on what's important, developing our people, the organizational excellence piece. And so that's why this stuff is super important. So start at the very high level. What does it mean to provide good feedback if you're a leader? Key words at key times, rounding, make sure you're there with your people and supporting them, listening, providing input back into the organization that they work in so they can see how their input is valued. So I think these are key things that we can do if we focus on them. Just we've had a lack of focus in those areas over the last several years. This will allow us to focus in those directions. And again, nothing that's super amazing here. It's just focusing on key things that make a difference from our leaders all the way through the organization. To me, this is the most important thing. It's providing scorecard feedback at all levels of the organization. So when we talk about aligning strategic goals, objectives, everybody understanding what those are in each of our departments, how that relates to what's going on at the district level, it's not only being able to report internally, reflect on where you're going with the work and how you're doing, it's driving those results back up to superintendent level, to the cabinet level, but then also ultimately to the board level. So at the end of the day, we are saying, we think these things are important in every department. Here's how they align to the district strategic plan. Here's how they're going to support schools in their mission. But how are we doing? If we're not doing well, adjust. Let's be honest in how we're doing. Adjust and refocus and constantly review where we are throughout the year. So I think out of all of this, putting the leadership development in place, focusing on our people, developing our people, and then providing the scorecard so that we all understand how we're doing and we're focused on what's important is going to push us in the right direction. So as we've talked about implementation of organizational excellence, how does this roll out in the district? And I think one of the things as Superintendent Connor and Mr. Renoff and I have spoken, we want to provide results right away. We want to make sure as we're doing things, we can pick the low-hanging fruit right away. And as we're reporting back over the next year to the board, we can show significant areas of progress as we move to that organizational excellence piece, and certainly customer service. So as you see, this sample implementation part is really high level. It's kind of just a first guess, but it really, I think, aligns with the strategic planning process that the superintendent's put in place. It kind of mirrors that, and it moves us into really focusing on our leaders over the summer, providing training for them, skill sets for them, and then moving into the planning process with strategic planning into the departments at the start of the new year, aligning with a scorecard. So during the year, next year, Mr. Renoff and myself can come back and report how are we doing on the things we said were important. And I think that's going to be the key benchmarks throughout the year next year, so we see an impact right away. And again, as you look at this slide, priority outcomes in terms of what are the things we're focused on, nothing super amazing here other than when you look at these, alignment of operational focus in every department across the district that aligns with strategic plan of the district. How are we supporting this organization to move in the right direction? We all know we play a support role. We need to make sure we understand what that support role means. How do we better provide value to all of our customers across the district, all of our stakeholders? How do we understand what needs to happen at every school site, make sure we're aligning with that in each department so that we can allow these schools to perform the way they can? And then again, through the scorecard, reporting back to the superintendent, reporting back to all of you in terms of how that's going. To me, this next one is super important, right? And so I think that, and I have to be honest, I think over the course of the last several years, we've lost some of the trust and confidence and relationship building with some of our people. And so that's why when Mr. Renoff and I were talking about bringing this program back because some of you have been around a while, we used to talk about student and customer service. It's really the trust and relationship level building at all levels within the department, because our people need to know that we are all aligned with the same goals and that we are focused on them, right? Developing their skill sets, making sure that they feel a good part of the organization that they're working in is going to drive this success. But we can't do that until they trust us, and we've got relationships with them to let them know that we're in this. Hey, we're in this together. And we want to all understand, we all want to be proud of the organization that we're in, whether it's department or whether it's the school district. Driving to the same level of excellence is super important. So I think that's a big key for me to focus on people moving forward. Employee satisfaction and engagement. There are a lot of cool things going on that are going to tie together. For example, employee training. If you remember a few years ago, you allowed us to hire a training person for the classified trainer for classified side of the house. That is going to tie perfectly to what's going on in terms of organizational excellence, because again, it's valuing people. It's saying, hey, where are you in your career? Would you like to move up? How do we support that? And so that kind of focus on people allows them to be part of the mission, part of the vision, part of where I want to go with the school district. Employee engagement. We're focusing a lot on employee engagement and employee satisfaction in human resources. This all ties together because the more aligned our people are, the happier they are in their jobs and where they feel the organization's going, the more they're going to be aligned with our strategic goals. And to me, it's about creating, whether Jody's in this job or Chris is in this job down the road, it's creating the momentum in the organization that it becomes self-living. And I have to say, we started this at one time and we never finished it. And you'll see the results of that. It is not where it could be. But if we really ingrain this in the culture of the district and our people believe and move in this direction, it doesn't matter who's sitting in these jobs down the road, because the organization will be a learning organization that constantly moves in this direction. And at the end of the day, what are we asking for? Really an improved customer service, stakeholder experience for everybody in the district, whether that's the person sitting on the side of me, my coworker, in terms of how we relate, whether that's a customer of mine at a school site, whether that's a member of the community who comes to one of our schools, whatever it may be, it's providing the highest value in all levels of our organization moving forward. And that's really what we're striving to do.
So thank you. I appreciate that overview. And I would just say this, if we back out up to about a 30,000 foot level, as we are in the midst of developing an overall strategic plan for the organization, this is what I would call at a micro level, the strategic plan. And this here today, what we've talked about, would be more at a, that's a macro level. This would be a micro level. And so when we talk about the prongs of a strategic plan, we know that academic excellence is first and foremost, right? That is the mission and the vision that we serve every student every day to achieve the best academic outcomes. But we know it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen in isolation. And because we are a people business, our internal stakeholders, employees, their satisfaction, the culture throughout our organization, from operations to the academic departments, are vital to the success of that. So this will help support that side, that prong of a strategic plan, when we're talking about supporting the people who are going to ultimately drive us to the academic outcomes that we're looking for. And so on that side, we're going to talk a lot more about that later in the workshop, of where we're headed. But that's how I would see this from a strategic planning standpoint. This lives as a prong within the strategic plan of organizational excellence in order to drive us towards academic excellence. Hopefully that makes sense if I was able to encapsulate that in a way that you can see how this fits in the picture. Now, I know we are very much, as a board, we're just initiating our conversations around the revised strategic plan. So those puzzle pieces are there, and you're getting pieces of the puzzle today, and then we will have more conversation around the whole puzzle of the strategic plan as we move forward into the spring. But as we're meeting and we're having conversations in depth about our goals, our priorities, and where we're headed, and getting input from you and from other stakeholders to formalize that strategic plan, I do believe this is a vital component to meet the goals that I've set out for the organization, and just from what I've heard throughout the transition. So I'll hand it over to you, Ms. Chair.
I think that it's important, some of us, as Mr. Renoff was alluding to, were part of the Studer piece with Superintendent Hamilton, and it had a huge impact. The key to it that makes a difference is it's just not customer service and service excellence to the community, it's service excellence to our employees in everything that they need, that they're striving for, from something as small as because the coffee maker hasn't been working for a couple weeks to a curriculum that has a research base that would make an impact. So I think that that is the difference. I have to say as well that since you've come on board, Superintendent Connor, and your collective staff, that the complaints coming into my email are almost null and void. So I think that I think that we have a great start here. Is there any more comments? Ms. Marinelli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Enoff, Mr. Dumas, and especially Mr. Connor, I think to me what you presented is just what we're about, and that we will only get greater under the leadership. Because what you alluded to, I was one of those that went through the Studer training, and it was ingrained. And when Ms. Hamilton left the district, it carried on because there were many of us that were trained. And this is where knowing what happened in the past can only make us better in the future. And I'm very excited to see this develop, because I know that I took it very seriously and tried to have the customer service. And in the student services side of the house, we knew that that would have a direct impact for students and a direct impact on parents, how we helped. And it just carried on, and it definitely improves student achievement and how the public views when having to deal with a huge organization as we are. So thank you so much. And Superintendent Connor, you're right on. So thank you.
So seeing no other comments,
No, go ahead.
Nope, you go ahead first. Go right around.
Yeah, I wasn't here for that piece of it, and I certainly ran my businesses through, I know Chris and I had this conversation about total quality management, which was analogous to this, and internal customer service is as important as external customer service. I think that's what the chair was alluding to, that everywhere you go, student, teacher, staff, and to one another, you're providing the highest level of customer service. I get all that. I think what's important, there's a couple things. My first question, I think, is probably to the superintendent. How would you currently describe our culture? And, you know, on a, I guess perhaps a scale of 1 to 10, where are we on that scale? And because culture also relates to morale. And I want to kind of get a benchmark of, if you're coming back a year from now, where are we today?
Well, I would say I have just personal opinions in terms of that. I wouldn't want to quantify it, but I think what will be really great about partnering with the Studer Group is they will be able to quantify with a pre-assessment and give us some breakdowns of what that would look like in various areas, whether that's human resources and how that works, and operational, day-to-day operations. My experiences just in the transition have been very varied, and it would depend on the topic too, of what, you know, how we feel about our morale or how we feel about certain aspects of the organization. So it's hard for me to quantify, but I think what part of this proposal will help quantify that so that we could get down to the grid. And that would be more, I would think, scientific than me providing just an impression. But I think we have a strong culture here. I think there are absolutely there are areas for us to continue to get better. And I can tell you where I've heard some rumblings or some noise internally and externally from stakeholders in pockets of areas. And then I can show you where there's things where we're just, we're beaming with pride, and we're very happy of the way things are in certain areas of the organization.
I think that's fair. The only other part that I would, we talk about your leadership, and I'm excited that you're here. But we're relying on your assessment. That is part of your leadership of where those pockets are. I guess I'm referring also to what you guys refer to as low-hanging fruit. Do you have any thoughts of where those areas of low-hanging fruit are?
Yeah, absolutely. To me, one of the areas of low-hanging fruit that we talk about all the time, we just never seem to fix it, is communication. And kind of what you're referring to, a lot of times you'll see some low employee satisfaction because we haven't communicated well, really, our direction, our intent, and what we're doing. So by the time it gets down to the employee level, they don't really know what's going on. So I think low-hanging fruit is training leaders to be very, very good at communication, very pointed in what they're communicating to their employees. I think that is a key place that we could really focus on right away and provide impact across the district. So especially in a large organization, it's tough to get the right message to the right people. And so we've got to focus on that. But that's key training for leaders in terms of what to communicate, how to communicate, and to continuously communicate.
Great. I would just share with you that my observations have been, we have issues with morale. We have some cultural issues. And I think part of it has to do with the fact that, at least since I've been here, I see that there's been a start, stop, and lack of follow through in terms of, and I think you guys talk about some of that. And then there's the additional workload that's come in, whether it's curriculum enhancement or job descriptions that get changed or following statute as it happens. It's a lot of, and what I've been concerned about is that if you look at the teacher job description, they're swamped, and we hear all the time they're begging for more planning time, more planning time, more planning time. And what I'm concerned about, and as for me, again, personally, just as one individual board member, is that we don't allow for the culture to slip into it's good enough. Because I've seen pockets of that. I don't think I think we've done a great job of maintaining RA. We got that wonderful accolade from Niche, and we're doing good. We're doing well. And I just don't want it to be yet another task that gets thrown on top of everyone's already busy workload, that people shrug their shoulders and say, here we go again.
That's a great point, and I would say what I love about this proposal is to hardwire these principles within the organization so that it shouldn't feel as if it's an extra thing on top. There are some components of this that are new practices, new ways of work that seemingly may feel, well, that's new, and that's something that we've never done before. And then we have to clearly communicate what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what the purpose is, and what the expected outcomes would be, so that we have that buy-in. So I think a lot of this does come down to not only partnering with someone like the Studer Group, who are going to bring some expertise, they're going to bring professional development, they're going to bring the right tools and the right resources, but then how we take that from leadership and really transfer that into the day-to-day actions so that people do understand that this is not an extra thing. This is how we do business in Sarasota County, because I do agree with you. You can rest on your laurels when you've been a school district that's been an A for 20 years. It's easy to get into a mindset to say, we're doing okay. But we want to be the best. We want to have the excellence. And that's what I think that we've brought with the leadership team, is that we have all decided we want to be the best school district, not only in the state of Florida, but nationally. And that's not just academic outcomes. That's how we treat our employees. We want to rival Sarasota Memorial Hospital about being the best place to work in Sarasota County. Those are the goals and ambitions that we have as a team.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Thank you. So I agree. I'm actually glad I went after you because there's a lot of things that you said that I would incorporate in here. So, and I think we've said it, I think it's important, we're a people operation. If we don't value our people internally and externally, and I think that's where the morale comes in. One thing in education, whether we like it, doesn't even matter who per se is in the legislature or the governor's office, but what I've seen at this point is that change is the constant, but it can be very disheartening to the point that Mr. Edwards just said, that it's one more thing piled on. And so you'd mentioned, and I agree, that if we can make it where there's value and people can see the value in the additional things that they're doing, then there's more buy-in, but it's going to be, I think people may be trepidatious at the beginning, but this started and then it didn't finish, right? So can you talk about what lessons were learned so that we don't avoid, so we take the past and look at it and bring it to an aspect of saying, why did we not finish it? Because as we know, COVID happened, all different things happen, new leadership, all different new board members, et cetera. How do we avoid that in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, again, you hit on it. Change happens.
Right.
And so, unfortunately, as we embarked on that journey under, Wilma Hamilton's leadership, change happened. And I don't believe we truly had the opportunity to hardwire the practices, as Mr. Dumas said, not only just at the district and the leadership level, but have it cascade down. One, consistency as far as standards of operating expectation across departments. I don't think there was clarity. So I think if there's anything that I would say is we need to commit. We need to commit. And when we've talked to the student group, it's not about, hey, we're going to get in, we're going to teach you, you're going to be, and we're leaving you and you're on your own. It's not about that. It is about a relationship with folks that do this for a living and want to make sure that, yes, we're committed, Sarasota County, well, we're committed to you, and we're going to make sure not only through the training and the tools and tactics, but the reflection part of it. As I talked about with Stephen Covey, that sharpening the saw, it's not going to be perfect. We're going to get better at it and better at it and better at it. So I think the lessons that we learn, if you talk to folks who experienced it in the past, to some of you and some of our leaders and folks in the schools, I can tell you right now, hands down, they would say it was fabulous because it's like excellence. It's hard to define, but you know it when you've experienced it. And so they knew it when they experienced it. It was just in pockets.
No, and I agree. So I agree with that, and I think that's looking forward of I don't necessarily know that specifically what it is, but to ensure that we don't fall down that trap again, because the change is inevitable in front of us, right? But I do think the trust piece, I think the customer service component, again, internally and externally, a lot of great things are certainly happening, but sometimes it gets lost with the lack of communication. And I don't mean our communication, by the way, Craig, because I think our communication has gotten much better since when I first got on the board. I think there's always an opportunity to grow there. But so I guess I'd be looking at what's that timeline, and I would assume it's ongoing, but so what does that look like? And then of course there's a cost to it that I'll be asking. But the value's there, I see, so.
So I would draw you back to the proposed timeline. Again, this is all very fluid at this time, but in year one, you would see there are many focus areas and priorities that we're looking at to begin initiating the planning process and developing those standards of excellence, training on that, training the internal teams. And so that is cascaded over several months. So it's not something that's just done like maybe in a two-hour session. This is a long-standing implementation. Depending on the category, you can see this would be year one, and then there would be a year two and a year three to continue a continuation of hardwiring that.
And one of the things I'd just like to add on that is, and again, that's why we focus today more on the business, finance, and operations side of the house, is because there is so much happening transformationally on the academic side of the house. The last thing we want to do is overwhelm our folks, but I think we've got the opportunity sitting in front of us to start on the business operations and finance side of the house, to start with the training, start with the implementation, building that foundation so that it can then easily transition over to supporting our friends and colleagues over on the instructional side.
I think that rounding is a perfect example, and I would believe that there's still some of that going on. I look at Mrs. Meckler right now. We called it walking and talking. It's a win-win practice where it beefs up communication on a one-on-one basis, whether that's in a school with administrators or from a district operations standpoint. I'm quite sure there's still pieces of that, as Mrs. Meckler is shaking her head yes, still going on that are highly effective from a morale standpoint, and from a productivity standpoint, and communication, that you just keep adding up the wins. It's a matter of it didn't end up being hardwired as the district went through change, new employees, and more, but certainly a tremendous amount of positives. Mr. Enos, would you like to add anything?
No, I think that, from being here for quite a while, and being a part of the operations side, I think that, one of the things when you look at that, I think that professional development is so important as it relates to the efficiency when people have the training to be able to then show that interest in the employees, so that those employees then professionally will get better, because you can see where you can help them in reference to their challenges that they have. And ultimately, I think I remember back when I came to staff meetings before, professional development, is the lifeblood of everything within an organization when it comes to dealing with people and all the different efficiencies. So, I think it's awesome for what they're doing. And back in the day when they did have it, I think that the leadership is there in order to make it happen, and I think that it'll only make people better, which ultimately will go back to the parents, which will go back to the students, which goes back to everything that we're looking for. So thank you.
So am I hearing that we would like the superintendent and his staff to proceed in this arena, Ms. Ziegler?
I just wanted to add, yes, I think this makes sense. I know I mentioned cost, but I think there's value there. So, but I think what Mr. Edwards said, I think is an important component, and I do agree that if there's a scientific approach to it, to evaluate where are we now, so that we can go back in a year, and et cetera, and see that growth. Where do we want to see us go, and then hold ourselves accountable so that we don't stop in the future with change, because we know that's going to happen. So.
Absolutely.
So we have consensus to proceed?
Yeah, I just want, what does proceed mean?
So what we'll do, we'll take this back, have further conversation with the student group, look at a proposal, and then I would imagine we'll bring that proposal to you at one of our regular board agenda. And we'll give you some more information in terms of going in depth into some of the pieces in terms of implementation, the training components of what's involved and what that looks like. And we'll bring it to a regular agenda item.
Well, and I think it's important to emphasize, too, that two of my colleagues have emphasized it, that my interest in this tutor training is that it is data-based, quantitative, that you get feedback that isn't of a personal opinion or such, that collectively allows us to see our organization moving in ways that provide increased productivity for service, organizational service in-house and out to our community. I know that in my experience with it, it was something that was very well done and liked, so.
What I would also just throw out, I know that when we talked to the folks that did our ESE assessment, I found that very valuable, that I got a chance to ask them questions about what they do and what their practices are and all that, so that as we go through our how to proceed, I would suggest that having their representatives here and hearing about their track record and their processes and all of those sort of things would be helpful to me.
I think, and if, Madam Chair, and we can talk with the board here, I know some of you have had some extensive work in the past with them, but I absolutely would work with the student group to maybe set up one-on-ones with board members who are interested in learning more about them versus bringing it back at a workshop for everyone is I'll get consensus on that. Okay, sound good.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other comments, we can move on to the next incredibly exciting topic, focused framework for advancing school performance, something I've very much been looking forward to. Mr. Connor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, we'll have our Chief Academic Officer, Deputy Superintendent, Ms. Rachel O'Day, who is going to be presenting on two items today. The first one is our focus framework for advancing school performance. That's a term that we've coined as we have built out a framework for how we are advancing accountability, the professional development, the rounding, all of the components needed in order to actually take us from great to really excellent. We're very considerate about using that particular topic or term, advancing school performance. So many times we talk about school improvement, and that has a very negative connotation when you hear school improvement plans or differentiated accountability. And we believe that when we talk about advancing school performance, it's where you start. You could be an A school, but there's room to grow in different areas. And so we were very intentional with using that terminology, and I don't want to steal your thunder. So I'm going to hand it over to Rachel O'Day because I can talk on this for hours.
Okay, so he's right. He can talk about this for hours. So I did invite Mr. Connor to jump in and interrupt me at any time because I'll be here for a while. If he has anything to contribute that he's passionate about sharing or maybe just adding on to what I'm saying. But we are going to talk about a lot of things this afternoon, and the focus framework is the first thing we're going to discuss. And I'm really excited to share that with you. There's been a lot of hard work, effort, energy, and passion put into this work and where we are just in a very short amount of time in launching this framework in September and October. And then we're going to jump into literacy for all, and that, again, is going to be very comprehensive, but I am trying to set the stage for future conversation because it's a very meaty topic, and this won't be the only time we talk about it. I'm hoping to set the stage in both directions, so when we continue to meet in workshops, the foundation's there, and we can hone in and get deeper on areas that we want to talk more about or learn more about. So jumping right in, our focus framework for advancing school performance lives in these 3 pillars: enhancing climate and culture, which you heard Mr. Runoff and Mr. Dumas speaking to, but today we're really going to focus on ensuring excellence and empowering educators. It is also based in a theory of action that is a compilation of multiple bodies of research about advancing school performance and a collaboration with our district staff and under Mr. Connor's leadership, determining what those big priorities were in our theory of action for Sarasota County. So when we think about high expectations, we want high expectations for all stakeholders and students. We have to provide those stakeholders with very high quality instruction that engages them deeply and also gives them multiple opportunities to engage in rigorous tasks and grade level assignments. This is really focusing on the work in our classroom, right? The epicenter of what's really going on here is within those 4 walls. So that theory of action is lining us up to think about high expectations, strong instruction, deep engagement, and multiple opportunities to practice and engage with rigorous grade level assignments. With that being said, we worked as a district team to then look at what are going to be our targeted areas of focus, right? We need to focus. That has been something I have heard for, since I've been in this district. It feels like 7 years, but it's only been a few months. And I've heard everyone talk about wanting to focus on academics. And we really, again, that starts with us at the district level, making sure our curriculum team, directors, chiefs, and myself are all aligned to working towards what we believe our schools need to continue to advance. So our 2 targeted areas of focus, one is growing core instruction. With growing core instruction, that's focused on that first pass of instruction. When a teacher is teaching standards, concepts, and skills to a student, that is considered core instruction. Regardless of anything else that may be pushing in or pulling out students, that is growing our core instruction and making sure we're equipping teachers to do the very best job within that first pass of instruction. The other part of that is coupling aligned tiered supports, right? We don't always learn with that first pass of instruction, and sometimes I may need advancement or I may need remediation and intervention. So that aligned tiered supports is that's what we mean when we say aligned tiered supports. They have to be working interchangeably in the core instructional block, K through 12. So those were our targeted areas of focus. And I want you to keep that in mind throughout the presentation because there should be a common theme with the work that we're doing and what we're trying to impact. So when we look at this visual, this is meant to be a comprehensive visual, really outlining what that focus framework is. It is broken into 3 parts: planning, monitoring and acting, and monitoring and supporting. Again, throughout the presentation, we're going to discuss this further and go deep into each section. But I really, again, want to highlight and celebrate the work that has been done by our chiefs, our curriculum directors, our program specialists, our school-based teams, including teachers, and anyone working with students and designing what that day-to-day instruction looks like. It has been a labor of love. It has required deep engagement, a growth mindset, trust, and collaboration to come out on the winning end of these impact reviews that we've been engaged in for several months now. So I do want to celebrate that as we get into that. But the first thing we had to do when everyone started was jump into what we call initial planning, very, very deep planning meetings with school leaders and sometimes school-based teams to learn more about the historical data, the data we have now, where we've been, where are we going, what do we want to work on, what have we worked on, because these experiences are individualized by each school. That's what makes it a whole lot of work, but the right work. So we spend an extensive amount of time doing initial meetings, working with schools to then set us up to jump into impact reviews and empower meetings. Those are new practices that we brought to the district for us to have a connected, collaborative, cohesive way of work in advancing our school's performance, and the bulk of this section of this presentation will focus on those two practices. The last part is the follow-up. We have to have monitoring and support after we do work. We don't just do the work and walk away, similar to what they're describing with the Studer Group. You're going to learn, you're going to be trained, you're going to analyze, you're going to plan, you're going to collaborate, but then we have to make sure the work gets done, but gets done together. This is not a solo game. We cannot do it alone, and the district and school-based team has to be very ingrained together on the work that each school needs to support teachers that will in turn transform students. So speaking deeply about impact reviews, we did this again, epicenter, going right into those classrooms in the four walls, using a student-centered lens to observe what students were doing and how they were interacting with the content the teacher was presenting. That resulted in planning action plans and really thinking through what teachers need to continue to support students on a very high level. And it also set the stage for collaboration with our district staff and our school-based staff on a regular basis. So looking at this overview process, this is meant to kind of describe to you what that day would look like for the school and for the district team. And it starts with the principal presentation, giving them an overview of the work that is happening and what we would be observing as a sampling that day. We do get lesson plan guides, which is excellent because it allows us to look at the learning target, the standard being taught, the strategies the teacher is working towards increasing students learning that target, and also the task. What specific task are we asking kids to do? Because we want to be very grounded in what's supposed to be happening and what was planned when we're thinking about how well our students are or not accessing that information. The time is mostly spent in our classroom observation section and our action planning session. We can observe anywhere between 10 and 20 classrooms during an impact review. It depends on the size of the school, and their targeted areas of focus will dictate how we navigate that observation cycle. We also would have anywhere between 1 and 5 walking teams. We can break it up by content. We can break it up by grade level. It really depends on what the school is working towards needing support and advancing, and we let the school-based teams decide that. When I say school-based team, I'm including teachers. We have teacher leaders, we have classroom teachers, out of the classroom teachers, and administrators, all a part of that team. And when I say district team, I mean the level like chief, the curriculum director, and the assigned program specialist for that school. After we walk through with predetermined look-fors, again, very, very important to norm our lens and to make sure we're based in research, not opinion, and that we're able to really target feedback and next steps for our schools. I'm going to share that in an upcoming slide. What are those look-fors and what does that mean? The action planning session is heavy. It's a lot of pushing and pulling on one another, deep thinking and analysis of the trends that have come out of that classroom. And it's something that I invite you to come see. We are in the middle of impact reviews right now, our second round, and you are more than welcome to join at any time to experience that. And even those of you that have been in education, you might, have a little action step that you can help us design. But it's actually awesome to see everybody engage in this deep thinking. So here are just some pictures to kind of paint a picture of what I'm talking about in words, but that upper right picture is a part of the debrief of the action plan. So each content team that walked creates an action plan, and then it's shared out at the debriefing portion so that we can align all the action steps and, in some cases eliminate some that might be overlap or expand some that might touch into another content. So we have a synergy and a golden thread in our action planning with schools, making it something that is achievable. And on the left side is what we really look at most of the time, and that's our students learning. Our students learning, what are they doing? What are they working on? Why? Is the supports given enough? What more can we do? And how do we help teachers really meet the needs of all the students in the classroom? This is another example really looking, again, outcomes-based. The students on the right are interacting with a literacy activity, and the picture on the left is just showing outcome from a science activity. And, we don't want to just build things. Did we apply the right skills and concepts when we created that product? So we, again, look at how students are learning and what they're doing to drive the action plans and the feedback for our schools. This is an image we use in principal meetings, talking about what's most important and what's least important. We call it loose tight, right? And teaching is an art and a science, and we don't want to take the art away from our teachers. That's what makes them individualized professionals and very skilled at their job. But we do look at the outer boxes as tight. We want to make sure what we're teaching is aligned to the standard, aligned to achievement level descriptors, and setting students up for success as they prepare for any of the outcomes-based measures that they are responsible for at any point K through 12. Then our students learning, obviously that's a non-negotiable. Students have to learn. And so we have to make sure that what we're teaching and the rate at which students are learning are appropriate so that we can continue to advance instruction in Sarasota. So that's where our lens lies. It doesn't lie so much on, did Mr. Connor teach it like Miss O'Day? No, maybe not. But you know what? The kids learned, and that's what's most important. When we look at predetermined look-fors, so this is an example. You do have, this was sent in your packet. It is an excerpt from a rubric that curriculum directors and chiefs and I created. It's, again, a compilation of research-based best practices with high effect sizes that we believe is a normed tool now in Sarasota to monitor core instruction and to allow schools to target areas that would have a high impact if they can improve practice on. Again, not everything. Schools are picking anywhere between 1 and 3 practices that they want to continue to work towards and grow together as a larger professional learning community. It is in phases because we never want to walk through a classroom and say yes or no. It's not a yes-no game, right? It's a progression through practices, and this progression allows us to target the right professional learning and action steps that may be needed to continue to support the school on increasing student discourse, for example. That is a high effect size practice for any learner, but if I'm a school with a high ELL population, I'm absolutely targeting this because it really helps develop oral language skills, which in turn helps students become better readers. So if I had an opportunity in a class where I'm working on character development, I may tell Miss Rose and Miss Marinelli to please turn and talk about paragraph 2 and let me know how that character's attitudes, beliefs, and feelings have changed since chapter 2. And that's a very rigorous ask. I'm not writing anything down, but I'm having a very in-depth conversation to apply skills related to the standards and concepts that I am teaching. Now, if I'm walking the classroom and only some students are doing that, why? Rather than all are really engaged. That means at some point in my instructional continuum, I've done a great job setting kids up for success because they're engaging in pretty much a level 4 or 5 task about that discussion. If it's some, okay, why? Maybe I jumped a little too quick to that rigorous activity. I need to dial it back and model. Maybe I need to give them more collaborative techniques. There's so many reasons why that may not be occurring, but we want to do is partner with schools and teachers to help them have the tools and strategies to get to where they want to go. So that's just an example of one of the indicators in our rubric, just giving us an example. So after the impact review is done, we use this rubric, and we have trends. So this is an example action plan. This is one of, I want to say, like 8 or 9 pages of this action plan. And at the top, you'll see just the compilation of school-wide trends. Again, this is not specific to any one teacher. It is the trends of the school and working on deciding what are going to be the biggest bang for our buck to focus on and help teachers continue to improve. And then we get into writing very detailed action steps about that with targets of who's responsible, what is the timeline, what are our resources, and how do we know it's working. And moving into that, it also coordinates our district staff they're written into these action plans. School-based teams have a task, and so do our district staff. On the right, that picture shows you the assigned program specialists this is just our elementary school schedule. We have one for middle and high, where it says all of our program specialists, who they're assigned to and why. And on the left side is the behind the scenes that the chief keeps track of what we're doing and where we are in the process, and they meet about this information every Friday to help support program specialists in celebrating the successes and then maybe working through some of the challenges. And then again, this is all meant to help schools navigate their action plans and continue to advance the performance that they want to see. So we have district outcomes from that. So not only was this important to support schools and really taking a deep dive into the things they wanted to work on and providing them support to do so, we also want to make sure at the district level, when we're giving support, that it's what people need. And one of the first, obviously I talked about those action plans. We do have live action plans in every school right now. And I did mention that we are in our second round of impact reviews now. That is this action plan is being built from, not redone, not starting over. How far did we get? And in some cases, if we had 4 objectives, maybe we really did 2 well, and we need to dive deeper into the next 2, or maybe we're ready to move on. I have principals calling chiefs saying, we're ready. When are you coming? Are we first? Okay, we're ready. We want to show you what we're doing, where we've been, and even I have some other principals saying, I want that program specialist twice a week, and my needs are, you know what, you better make it happen, or they're calling Mr. Connor. So we're getting pushed around a little bit for the support we're giving, but that's the kind of reaction that we want to see. People are engaging and collaborating in this work, which is excellent. We have engaged in 50 professional learning sessions and counting, and those are very individualized in the school. That doesn't mean that we did them ourselves. The school-based team, in some cases, has created and facilitated and implemented trainings based on the learning that they've had from their impact review. Or in some cases, our curriculum directors and program specialists have created and facilitated and went through those trainings, and then sometimes both. It really depended on the capacity of the school and what the needs were. We also focused very heavily on enhancing our PLC practices and making sure that schools had the resources and tools to deeply look at data, deeply plan instruction, and ensuring support of all teachers. So they have a lot of resources. That doesn't mean that those resources have to be used, because some schools had already done that. Great, use that, that's working for you. But if we found places where that was a gap, we did provide the floor so people can continue to work towards excellence there. The next thing that happened, and thankfully through negotiations, the union also felt that we needed to ensure we were supporting our teachers and they had access to high quality professional learning. We were able to negotiate 15 hours of professional learning that teachers could take. And what we did was we took all the trends from all the impact reviews and determined 3 practices and 3 processes. What practices is everyone working towards that they really want to continue to advance, and let's give them some more support. Now, that first training, assessment for learning, it could be that at Goshen Elementary, they did that themselves, they've got it, and they have a great framework happening. But then we might have some teachers that first pass at learning wasn't enough, and they want to go access more district support, or schools haven't gotten there yet, but I have teachers that are ready. So it kind of serves both purposes, and we found those to be high leverage practices that we wanted to make sure we gave everyone access to planning and training around. The next part, again, process, PLCs. Making sure that we understand PLCs. PLCs was rolled out a few years ago, and we have some people that did not get that training. So we heard that loud and clear from our schools. They felt like those that were a part of the work understood it, those that weren't don't, and that we need to be very intentional about bringing our teachers along, so that's what those are set up for. This next plan, we looked at a very significant need. Everyone knows how challenging 3rd grade is and how important that year is. And for those of us that, just a little refresher, 3rd grade is that mandatory retention year. If you don't get a level 2 or higher, you are mandatory retention by the state, but then we do go through a portfolio process and summer school to continue to give students an opportunity to pass. But if they don't, that is a year that teachers have a lot of angst. There's a lot of stress. No teacher wants a student to fail. So we are engaging in some extra resources and specific professional learning and support for 3rd grade teachers only. Yes, go ahead.
And just in addition, remember that the school accountability grades for this year have changed. And one of the newest changes that is very significant for elementaries, because it's an additional cell. There are 7 cells in elementary that are all 100 points each. Reading proficiency overall, math proficiency overall, science proficiency overall. Then you have lower quartile gains for reading and math, overall gains for reading and math. Now you will have an 8th cell for elementary, and that will be 100 points. So that's a significant increase for just 3rd grade reading proficiency. So it's kind of a double whammy. You've got 3rd grade cell, and then you also have overall reading proficiency, which includes 3rd grade. So that's a double whammy that we're gonna see.
Yeah. And again, that increased pressure just makes it more difficult. So we wanted to make sure we can cut that pressure with support. And with that, we designed a professional learning session where we were really holding hands on the decision-making process based on the data, the now data. Our elementary curriculum director worked on analyzing all of the data, producing targeted student groups for every school, and creating a live folder for that. So that was taking that off the teacher's plate, off the school's plate. There is a component of that decision that teachers have to finalize where they may say, well, you know what, Rachel that just had a bad test, and if we look back at this, she really belongs in this group. We just kind of put the shell there, and they have the flexibility to move that around. But then giving them research-based strategies, not only for small group and intervention-based work for those that might be struggling, but also the support in the core classroom, because without that, we're going to be in an intervention world forever. We have to make sure that core is strong, so we're intervening on less students. So it does do both of those things, and that first session is actually taking place this week. All right, another practice, empower meetings. This is all about collaboration, monitoring, and support. This is another new practice, and I will tell you, this is the truth. Our leaders were not excited about this initially. It's a lot of stress, and I can tell you from being someone who went through empower meetings in the different roles I've been in, working under Mr. Connor, it is stressful. It's stressful when you're meeting with your superintendent and you're talking about the work. And you know, like me today, I want to make sure I'm presenting comprehensively to you, and they did the same. But it all ended well. They were excited. They got a lot of feedback. They got to hear from their peers and realize that some of the struggles were the same, and also celebrating each other's successes. So that was great. It created a sense of unity in the room, and they realized that our superintendent has been a CAO in 3 different districts and knows what he's talking about. So that was great when he was able to give feedback and specifics and push people's thinking. And again, it gives Mr. Connor a forum to really hear about the instructional work. That's the work. But you know what? He's in the CEO seat, and sometimes you don't get to be as involved. So again, bringing all of us together to have that discussion experience was great. We had specific district staff there as well, those that may need to get direction from the superintendent. He may look at me and say, hey, they're asking for this, or this is an issue, or hey, we need some of it came into operations and facilities. We need a fence here. Where's the work? Why is this work delayed? So everyone's accountable, 360-degree accountability, but most importantly, that principals have what they need to continue to advance the work. Did you want to add anything to that? Okay. So the room setup was like a fishbowl. We had our principal and district staff in the middle, and then the level-like principals around that. We had a data display up where we can look at the data that we were speaking of, because we really want to stay grounded in student outcomes. And then, again, that interaction between the superintendent and the principal. More pictures. Again, I know that we look really serious, and that is because we are intently listening. And in these pictures, this is the Venice Middle School principal doing an excellent job sharing the story of Venice Middle School and what they're working on and where they're going and the support that he needs. So then our next steps. So we already talked about the fact that we're in the middle of mid-year impact reviews, building on the work that has been done, monitoring, supporting, and planning to give everyone that last push through May. And then with our Empower meetings, it's the same thing. We're going to be meeting at the end of, actually early March now, end of February into early March. And at that point, all of our PM2 data will be complete. Our middle and elementaries finished PM2 in December. And then our high schools are currently taking that right now. And we want to have that fresh data to speak on and make sure, again, that there's an opportunity for feedback and collaboration so that everyone has what they need moving forward through May. Questions?
Well, thank you, Ms. O'Day. I appreciate the very comprehensive overview. That concludes that part of our presentation for the framework for advancing school performance. So if anyone has any questions, we'll be glad to answer. And we've got other team members here who can contribute if necessary, who have been a part of the process.
I have a few comments.
Okay.
I think that having been introduced to what is the equivalent of impact reviews and Empower meetings and being provided resources, it was actually Superintendent Norris that brought data in and accountability and targeted groups and closing gaps. And initially it was extraordinarily frightening. It was like behind the scenes, can anyone take him away? However, it became part of our practices, and I'm sure there were still some schools and teachers doing it. It lends itself to security. You know exactly where you are. You know where your students are. It leads to predictability in job security. It leads to a communication that is very strong on what you need to accomplish goals with particular students. So I've been waiting for this for several years to come back and be hardwired, but I would like our community to know and our staff to know that it does, as you have alluded to, it does transition to initially fear and accountability to a tremendous amount of security and success, and starts to feed itself. So thank you. Ms. Marinelli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that what we talked about earlier, having it hardwired, because like Ms. Rose said, Dr. Norris brought in the data, and we were all just so overwhelmed and thinking, this will never catch on to this, and it did. But then it lost momentum, just like our PLCs. Our PLCs, professional learning communities, those are not new to this district. We started that, Dr. Norris started that. Venice High School was built with the whole concept of PLCs. So, and that concept ebbed and flowed. So here we are back with this in a much more strategic way. So I'm going to be very interested to see how this progresses, and I think with the people you have in place, our students are going to benefit, and our teachers are going to really benefit. And once they get through the newness of it and everything, they'll see it does work. It does work. So thank you.
Mr. Edwards?
Thank you. How often do impact reviews happen? How many in the course of a school year?
So if you have 39 schools, double that. You can even do, it depends on the school, you can do 1 to 3. So you can think of it as a beginning, a mid, and an end year impact review, but it depends on the needs of the school.
And then what happens for the following year? Do you start over, or are you built from the previous year?
So in some cases, we would build from the previous year, so those action plans will still live there. We don't want to just keep starting over. Continue to advance, and that's a continuous cycle that we will go through, but the practice of impact reviews will remain, and we will do that again. What ends up happening probably by year 3 is that schools will do their own because they're ready, they don't want to wait for you, they know what they need to do, and they want to look into it and get to action.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
That's impressive. How does teacher turnover affect that?
Well, when you think of each plan being very individualized, so I'll give you an example. We have some schools right now that have brand new grade level or a math department where everyone's new. So where do you think a need is? In that math department. So what is the action plan to support those teachers if they are new to the team with a lot of responsibility and trying to take students where they need to go? That's design professional learning, design coaching, designing PLCs, and whatever we can do based on what we see that teachers need. And again, if it's a new teacher to a team of seasoned teachers, they fall right into that process. They fall within the trends. It may bring the trend down, or it may bring it up depending on the capability of the group. But also, there should be also very intentional support for brand new teachers. That's outside of this process, but they do fall right into the trends.
So I'm going to throw this back to you for a second. That I've never gotten what our actual teacher turnover percentage rate is, and I'd like to see that as a benchmark. I'd like to see our HR areas be accountable to getting those numbers down. They can't 100% be responsible. I get there's a lot of external play that happens there, and when I look at the those personnel reports, personal or, I think we need to know why. I think we need to know specifically why people are leaving so that we can address those issues, because this work is so time consuming and so intricate and so necessary. And if we're losing teachers on the back end and we're not building on it year over year, then we're in a hamster wheel. So they're connected as far as I can tell in terms of maintaining teachers and building on them for year to year. The 15 hours of professional development, is that is with substitute backfills?
That is not during the duty day.
Okay, so how does that happen?
It's scheduled after the duty day, and they're paid a stipend to attend.
Okay, and how do they manage that? Because then once again, I'm still hearing there's never enough time, and now we're adding 15 hours.
It's not mandatory. It's voluntary. So what we do in the school day, that job embedded support, when I said we had 50 plus professional learning sessions, those are happening during the school day, where it's they have an hour of common planning in every school. And we push into that time. It may be a rolling PLC where if I'm in a high school or middle school, I send a program specialist or Sue Meckler out, and she's there that whole day and providing rolling PD for people to drop in, or it's assigned during another regularly scheduled time that's already allocated within the day.
One other thing that I complimented Mr. Connor on when he did his presentation for the chamber of his first 100 days, and I have a whole list of things that I loved hearing about, but one of them specifically was the fact that just under half of our community is at or below the poverty line. And when poverty is an issue in the classroom for students, it's a whole other host of issues that could impact an impact review, like what other supports are necessary to make sure that those students have everything that they need. Not every student has mom and dad at home helping them with their homework. And so those are the kinds of things that I'm not quite sure culturally I feel that our school district has wrapped themselves around culturally. I think they do it at the school level. I feel that when I'm at the schools, but I don't feel that in the big culture of the, when we're having a board discussion. I don't feel or hear those kinds of impacts. So I guess my question is, are those factored into the impact reviews? Are there student services that are embedded into an impact review?
So the way we support a school, that is factored in. So who's assigned and how frequently and what work are we doing in the schools? Our schools that are dealing with more complexities do get more. They need more, so they do get more. And some of that angst is that I don't know how to support a student dealing with all the complexities within my classroom, which is just as much as an instructional delivery issue as it is with out of the classroom student supports. As far as doing an impact review on the student services side, that is not what this is, but we do intimately get to know the schools, and if we find an issue there, we do reach out to the student services side and say, hey, we need you here, we need you with this, here are some issues that we're having.
And to piggyback on that, the power in the Empower meetings too is that is an opportunity for a principal to meet with executive leaders all in the same room. So it's not I'm emailing this one and I'm not getting a response or I'm not doing this. Everyone's in the same room hearing the needs. And it can go into what are those wraparound services that I need in my school because I'm dealing with these particular aspects in the community, whether it's a community issue, safety and security issue, wraparound services, all of those things are on the table when we're at an Empower meeting. And then we can connect a Deb Jackalone or whoever's in the room right there because everyone's there listening to the needs of that principal.
So I'm going to say this. I know that because I'm at the schools and I talk to people and I feel that people are getting their services. I don't feel it at the board level. And when we're talking about the data, those are the kinds of things that the board, I think, needs to understand that these are the kinds of wraparound services that are coming up. Here are our top 5 wraparound services. And I hear all the time from community members, donors, philanthropy, what do you need help with? That's an answer. That would help me give an answer. So those are other levels of data that I'd like to see roll up to the board.
Mrs. Ziegler, do you have
Thank you.
anything?
Yeah, well, this is amazing. I enjoyed pre-reading it, but your enthusiasm delivering it was a nice cherry on top. I will say that one thing I said to Mr. Connor was that I appreciate the change in language, because when you overuse something, it loses its meaning. We see that all the time. And there are important things when it comes to school improvement plans. It seemed like everyone's just checking a box. I can't tell you how many I've read that. And it's just because we weren't delivering it in a meaningful way, so it didn't bring value to the people who were completing it. So the advancing school performance, I appreciate that. I hope that really does change the approach or the on the other side. I guess that was one of my questions, though. I know this was talked about, I know Gary Doris comes up all the time, and it's always this, I was around for that time. But I like data, but I also understand there's human beings attached to all this, and so that tells a piece of the story, but there's a lot of customizing needed, which is what I'm taking away from this, which I really appreciate. What was the response, like, honestly, because we were talking about, you mentioned, like, people were fearful of it, so what's your take on the response so far?
Initially, I want to give credit to our administrators and teachers, because there was an angst of fear. It's new, it's unknown. These people just started, and they're going, right? We're learning and going at the same time, and that's because instruction's happening every day. We can't sit back and learn. We got to learn and go. And this is a way to do that, but there was nerves. But a lot of that initial meeting that I described really helped, and then our level chiefs also met with each principal before the impact review to help them prep and plan. So as much as the expectations are high, the support is even higher, and I think that is part of the success with this process, where I will say that teachers are probably learning that more second and third hand, because we're working directly and intimately with the principals, which they are impacting teachers, where our impact might be at a second or third tier. And I think I'm very proud of our teachers, because they had to open the doors and say, yes, you can come in and learn from us. Yes, you can use those look-fors. Yes, you can go back and plan based on my needs. And you know what? Credit to them and the cultures in our schools that they believe in their leaders in order to allow us to do that. And at this point, I would say initially there was some concern over the whole process. And it's nerve-wracking when someone's coming in your room. It's nerve-wracking to hear the trends, and their mindsets are shifting towards, this is support, this is growth. We're not looking for perfection, we're looking for progress. And that will continue to take hold. It's taking more time at that level because of our level of interaction being more at the top than with the teachers.
And again, when you talk about human nature, trust is a big factor of that. And we haven't had the time in the 6 months. Today's 6 months, by the way.
Right. Yeah. Congrats.
6 months since I started. It takes time to build trust, right? And we are moving. We're moving at an accelerated rate, and we recognize that, and we're trying to help communicate and bring people along. But we do understand that while aggressive as we are around making sure that we have great outcomes for kids, that we got to continue to build trust so that people understand this isn't a gotcha. This is really about building excellence and a way of work in the organization for the ultimate goals, right? But we do understand that human nature is a big part of this, and that we're going to continue to work. We're not going to slow down, but we're going to continue to work to get people on the bus and working along with us.
No, I think you raised the point. It's a very vulnerable place for people, and coming off of lots of change, regardless of where anyone stands on it, the change has existed. And so I understand and respect that that's challenging. At the same time, and I remember you saying this about the assessment, like day one, diving in and waiting for this report. So I'm very excited. But to your point, there's a lot of pressure on y'all to get going at the same time. And so meeting in a reasonable aspect, I think, is very meaningful. I'm really excited about this. And I will say, something that I had stressed for years, and it was probably more in a metric-based calculation, and I'm actually much more happy to hear it the way you're approaching it. And it comes down to, Mr. Edwards kind of saying, there are certainly schools that have more demands, or the student population or family population has more demands or needs. And putting it in a FTE kind of calculation in the past, when it goes like, what kind of support services do you need from a staffing standpoint? I felt like we were kind of missing the ball over years. We would do it more based on a calculation, based on numbers, and not really look at the culture and really do a narrow, deep dive. And so to hear, I hope that those are translating into conversations on the front lines to provide those supports. And I'm hesitant always I think it's important to make sure our community knows that these do exist, and they do have an impact. At the same time, I love that we're focusing on core instruction, and then bringing those supports in, so it's not not that this can come out the wrong way, but not a cop-out. It's not an excuse as to why. We would just need to provide that support. We recognize it's there, but that's not going to be left on deaf ears. We're going to make sure we provide those supports, but we know that people can, when given the support, they can rise to the occasion. I just think that's really important. So is that going to translate, though, into any kind of actual permanent staffing situations, or is that all centralized when we're talking about support wraparound services?
So the support wraparound services that I was speaking to is the district staff that we have, and that is going to remain where it is. And the schools have differing staff levels depending on what they decide to spend their Title I money on. What are we allocating here at the district level? That comes into a discussion about staffing, ESSER, pick a position. There's a lot that goes into that. That is going to be transforming over the next, I would say, month.
Okay.
We have a lot of work that's already been done, and we are in the final stages of engaging focus groups and district staff members to make sure that we have thought of everything as we are moving forward in changing what we actually have.
Well, I love it. Keep up the good work. It's exciting.
Mr. Enos, would you like to add anything?
Well, I just think it goes along with, ultimately comes into professional development, it comes back to consistency. The big thing that I like, and in law enforcement, they started it back in NYPD with Comstat. But basically, they brought all the supervisors together to talk about problems within the community, and this person may have an idea which ultimately will help this person, which will help this person, which ultimately then focused on the resources and the support that they needed in order to get to the issue and the problem. So when I look at this, I think it's amazing because obviously at the sheriff's office, we also did this, what's called Star Trek. But it was the same thing. It's about bringing people together to make sure that all of the consistency in that everybody is on the same page, which ultimately you gain a lot more when everybody's behind it than if it's one person pushing the ball up the hill when everybody is doing it. So again, I think that this is, that goes right into that process, professional development, consistency, principals all on the same page, academic support, finding the schools that need extra support, being able to do that. Ultimately, that will, based on this, should cause more support, more education, kids getting better grades, everybody becoming more focused. And then I'm assuming that out of this, there's got to be some competition amongst the principals, I would assume, because I assume they are pretty competitive as human nature, that when they come, that they want to be able to show their increases. And obviously, I think competition is, making our students smarter and making our staff better, obviously, is whether that's a little something to the side, but I think that I'm sure that happens.
Yeah, and in our Empower meetings, it was awesome to see some of the personalities and attitudes that were saying, hey, I am Rachel Shelley of the Booker High School, okay? You can imagine what that sounded like, but it was awesome, and they brought that to the table. They're talking about their school, great things and things that they're working to improve, so that did occur. So you do know them very well.
Right. And when we go back to the trust factor, now having gone through a round of this, I think it gets even better round 2 and round 3 because they see, okay, now I know what to expect.
It can become fun. It actually does become fun, along with the security, the predictability. You know where your students are after every progress monitoring, the impact review. You're not dealing with the unknown. And speaking of competition, I have to mention Nancy Dubin. When we were co-principals, we competed, we had fun, and actually supported each other when one of us outdid the other. We shared how we got there. I want to just point out that what you're describing is a network of hardwiring our processes, our procedures, our systems, something that is going to move all of our students. And you also said one key piece that I have to mention, I think it was you were referring to Ms. Minnelli, that was putting the data together of students with gaps for the schools. That didn't occur in the past. We were all looking at Dr. Cantalupo with glazed eyes of how was this work all going to be done. That is monumental, and it's key for teachers and for principals to really focus on the work, to be given the data, and I thank you for that. That's huge when you've done the work in the schools. Ms. Marinelli, anything you'd like to add before we move on?
Well, I liked when Mr. Edwards brought up the student services, because that is an area that is not talked about, but a lot of work goes into that. And, Ms. Jackalone, she and her staff and the counselor, school social worker, school psychologists, they work so hard with the schools to work with all the kids. And that's where also they do the outreach to the foundations. They do the outreach to the counseling centers, and it's just not talked about enough because that is the soft area. But a lot of support is provided. Is it always enough? No, because the needs are so great at the schools. But I think it's important that that does get included because they all work very hard and they work with the schools. So it is definitely a team part in there, so thank you.
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Edwards.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate again, I think how important those turnover rates are, because I was sitting there, I was empathizing with the Venice Middle School principal, thinking like, here I am in front of everybody, and if the turnover happened and he has no way of solving his problems because he's starting from square one over and over again, that's got to be a frustration. And so I think that when you're, I'm sure the fun competition part of that is all real, but it could also be very frustrating. And then the other piece that I would just want to sort of reiterate around, I know I wasn't being facetious about not everybody has mom and dad at home helping them, but there are plenty of folks available in the community that would love to mentor students in whether it's reading or math or wherever they are in the grade level, and knowing that from the school, knowing that data, having that, as I say, roll up to the board and to student services, those are the kinds of things I think we can have an impact on. No, not to coin a phrase, but that's low-hanging fruit as far as I'm concerned.
One quick question, I'm sorry. When it comes to professional development, I know it was mentioned there's not mandatory and some are mandatory. Do you find the non-mandatory being taken pretty heavily? I mean, is there any kind of trends you take
Our
away from it?
first one is this week, the third grade session. So the other ones actually start at the end of the month. And the reason we would have liked to start it right after break, but we have our program specialists who are also in our schools 3 to 4 days a week are the ones writing the PD.
Okay.
And so our first one that was done with a very high sense of urgency was the third grade, because the quicker that we get that to teachers, the quicker they can implement the process and the resources. So, but next time we do come together, in the workshop in February, we're going to be doing some achievement data updates. We're going to be talking about ESC review, and then I can also continue to bring whatever comes out of here that we want to talk about more.
Wonderful, thank you.
Seeing no further comment, we are going to take a 15-minute break before our final agenda item for today's workshop. We will return at 2:41. Okay, we're calling this meeting back to order, January 16th, 2024. Continuing in our workshop, I would say we're saving the best for last, but it's all been outstanding. So we're moving on to literacy plan. Superintendent Connor, if you'd like to introduce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this is part 2 of our continuation from the Focus Framework for Advancing School Performance. There has been a request, consensus from the board, to talk about in-depthly what is our literacy plan. And so we've been working over the course of several months to present this to you in terms of where we're at status-wise and where we're headed in terms of improving literacy outcomes. So we'll have Ms. O'Day take it away.
Yeah. So starting off with our initiative, we are calling it Literacy for All because our goal is to catch as many students as we can that are at risk right now and help them accelerate their progress towards proficiency and beyond. And working with Craig and his department, he did design this visual for me. I was very adamant that I wanted something to anchor us in this discussion. This is not a discussion that we're going to have just today. It is going to live throughout our strategic plan and our work because it is a goal for this district and this board to make sure we're leading the state, not only just to be leaders in the state, but to lead our students and make sure that they have access to literacy, which is a transforming part of their life to be able to read. So thank you to the team. What is Literacy for All? This is a comprehensive approach similar to what you've heard and built off of what you've already heard to impact Tier 1 core instruction and to provide high quality supports to teachers who are teaching students reading every single day. It needs to be aligned to the science of reading, and we need to make sure that it is alive and well in our classrooms and that we're equipping teachers to do this very difficult work with our students. The goals for this these are our balcony level goals. There's a lot of data underneath what I'm sharing today. And right when we get into data, we're talking about the FAST assessment. We're talking about state standardized assessment for grades 3 through 10, but there has been a triangulation of other data beneath this that we have through Performance Matters and Tier 1 progress monitoring tools that also paint the same picture. So this is actually in alignment with what other data marks are telling us, but for the sake of today, we're just looking at our standardized state assessment and setting goals around that. We want to see students make a year's growth in a year's worth of time on whatever state assessment they're taking. So the FSAA is for our students that are not on standard curriculum. The FAST is for students in grades 3 through 10 that are on standard curriculum, and then our STAR assessment is for our pre-K through second grade group of students, and all of these indicators can measure literacy. We want students to make a year's worth of growth, no matter where they are, advanced or underperforming. We want to reduce the amount of level 1s and level 2s going into middle and high school. So those transitional grade data points from 5th and 8th grade are really important because it does take more than a year to close achievement gaps, multi-years at times. So if a student starts with us in kindergarten, they should be ready for middle school. That is not a tall order, and it should be expected. When we get into middle school, if we reduce the amount of level 1 and level 2 students, not to say that there may be some, but we need to reduce that number so that intervention support is manageable. And again, we have a higher probability of exiting students from middle school into high school ready to access that content and that information, increasing graduation rates, but then also opening doors to the variety of pathways that we have. We have a lot of pathways for students to excel in this district, but literacy is always going to be a stopgap to any of them, whether it's graduation or anything alternative that we have in place. We have to make sure we're producing literate students. So if you've heard about the science of reading, you've heard of Scarborough's rope. This is definitely embedded in all of the training that people receive when thinking about the science of reading. But what's important about Scarborough's rope is that it shows the complexity and the intricacy of providing high quality reading instruction, and it breaks it into 2 components. Those components are language comprehension and word comprehension. Those have to go hand in hand for a student to become a strategic, fluent reader and one that can comprehend what they're reading. I think the piece that is probably maybe the newest or the one that really carries its weight in the science of reading is the word recognition section and making sure students can decode and encode. They have to have the phonemic awareness to apply the phonics skills to then be able to identify unfamiliar words, break them apart, and read them. Very, very important as we get older and we are not getting that foundational skill instruction as much. They have to rely on their own skills to be able to work through multisyllabic words and difficult text. So the science of reading is based on a body of research over multiple years and outlining what works and what students need to become fluent readers. That's really important, and that is going to be grounded in the learning that we engage in as a district moving forward to make sure that our literacy instruction is having the impact that we desire. With that being said, again, working with Craig's team, him and his team also took my ideas and put it into a visual because I wanted us to visualize, yes, Scarborough's rope is the reading instruction that teachers should be putting in front of students, but then our district has to also provide the complex support needed for our teachers to be able to do this work. So that's what this rope is demonstrating. The blue threads of the rope are showing you the first part being high quality literacy instruction. Those are all the things that we have to have in place in order for high quality literacy instruction to occur. And then the green threads are really going to be talking about community partners, the union, the board, district staff, and how we engage so we can empower our stakeholders to excel. And when we're looking at those top three blue ropes, high quality core instruction, aligned tiered supports, and advanced progress monitoring, those are the things that have to occur in a classroom with a teacher. High quality core, aligned tiered supports based on data, but we have to have advanced progress monitoring skills to understand what kids need so we can give it to them. The targeted professional learning is also something that can be alive in schools, but it's also something we are providing at the district level. But that coaching and intervention support is also needed. Teachers need coaching, not just learning. I need to be coached through what I'm doing regularly. I need someone to consult with. I need someone to lean on. I need someone to make decisions with me, to watch me, and sometimes maybe do it for me. So the coach is meant to empower teachers because our teachers are in front of our kids, whether it's intensive reading in high school and middle school, general reading classes, pre-K through 5, literacy, 120-minute block. Those are the people that are in front of kids. Everything else that comes in or comes out is, it varies. Varies from school to school. It varies based on vacancies. It varies based on the year and the day we're in education. But what doesn't is that teacher teaching the students in front of them, and we have to make a large investment on equipping them to do this work. So this proposal is very heavily laid into that. So as I said, there's a lot of data that we can look at in this district, but for the sake of today and painting a balcony level picture of our gap, we're going to look at the FAST assessment and previous FSA assessment data. With attacking the gap, I want to say, as Mr. Connor said, we're a high-performing district. We've been in the top 5 for a long time, doing well, A-rated district. Those are all things to celebrate. We're just not going to be talking about that data. We're going to be talking about where the gap is. So the data is not meant to celebrate. It's meant to have a call to action and think about what work we need to do to better enhance and advance this district. So with that being said, thank you for Dr. Cantalupo working with me always and everyone on the data and making sure that we're crystal clear about what it says and doesn't say. But we are looking at 2 data sets. PM3 at the end of last year was the FAST assessment that our 3rd through 10th graders took. And then we're going all the way back to 21-22 school year, the last time they took the FSA, because that was the last time we were able to measure gains in growth. In order to measure gains and growth, you need the baseline to build off of. At the end of this year, we will be able to measure gains and growth from this past year because students took the FAST assessment the first time, but we're going to be looking at gains and growth today as well. The data set will flow all students, meaning anyone 3 through 10 that took the assessment. Then we're going to remove the students with disabilities population to just look at our non-disabled students, and then we're going to just look at our disabled students to see how that data changes. Looking at the first slide, this is our FAST PM3 at the end of last year. And when we look at this slide, this is also looking at all students. And you can see it's kind of got a bell curve distribution where the lowest performing bar is your blue, that's your level 1, and the highest performing being that dark rust red. And in the middle, you have your level 2 at orange, your level 3 at gray, and your level 4 at yellow. And what this is showing you, a few things. It's showing you that as we leave elementary school, reading skills are not improving, they're actually declining. It's also showing you that in this picture, there's a range. Third grade here, if you combine the blue and the orange, that's 38% of third graders at the end of last year were scoring a level 1 and a level 2. That's one of the lower range data points. The higher range data point would be 10th grade, where 47% of our students are scoring at a level 1 and a level 2 coming out of 10th grade PM3. So there's a range here of this gap, but we do have a good amount of students scoring a level 1 and level 2, and that is one of those pieces that we want to reduce. When you look at now we're looking at taking out our students with disabilities subgroup, looking at just our students that don't have a learning disability. And it's kind of got the same distribution, still looking a little bit like a bell curve. Some of those thresholds have gotten better, but overall, the lowest would be third grade at 30% of students scoring a 1 or 2, and in 10th grade, as much as 43% of students. So it does change, it does get better, not significantly, but it does get better. You'll still notice that as we leave elementary school, if we're not close to proficiency, that gap continues to widen. The next slide is showing our students with disabilities only, and you'll see that has a very atypical distribution and showing that our students with disabilities students are scoring in the level 1 and level 2 range more predominantly, and that does continue again to increase into our secondary grades. And I want to say, this is not the fault of our teachers. Middle school and high school teachers are content teachers. That is how they're trained. That's what they're taught to do. When you get a student that is not reading, that is a whole different skill set, a whole different training dynamic, a whole different need for resources. And again, there's an opportunity in this district to provide that very intensive resource and support moving forward so that they can be better equipped to manage these gaps. This next slide is looking at just a sample of our school grade formula. So here, when you look at this, this is our middle school formula. There are 9 school grade cells. In high school, there are 10. In our combo schools, there are 11. And as Mr. Connor explained, in our elementary schools, there are 8 because of the additional third grade cell. But typically, when we're looking at this data set, we're looking at those that are either proficient or not proficient. And when we break down a school grade formula, you do obviously see the green where we have proficiency and acceleration. But when we look at the blue boxes, that is talking all about students making a year's worth of growth or not, whether they're proficient or not. So if I'm 3 years behind, did I close that gap by 1? If I'm 2 years ahead, am I still accelerating at the same rate? I want to make sure that when kids are with us in Sarasota, they're making a year's worth of growth and a year's worth of time no matter where they are. This past year with just the baseline grades, they just looked at proficiency, and that helps and hurts some places. And when you look at an A school here, this is one of our A schools, and you look at their proficiency, but then if you look at their ELA learning gains at the lowest quartile, those students, they're considered the bottom quartile of that group, are 40% are making a year's worth of growth, which we want to see years worth of growth well above that. Right? We want to start pushing in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, meaning that we're providing that really explicit core instruction and tiered supports to give them that advancement. So the data we're looking at next is looking just at our gains and our bottom quartile. So again, pulling that off, when we look at the blue bars are all gains, all students. This slide is all students, including students with disabilities. And we're looking at grades 4 through 10 now because third graders don't have that baseline to get gains and growth unless they've been retained. And that actually is a little more skewed, so we didn't want to look at that data as a part of this because it is different. When we look at the blue bars, you'll notice again, kind of following the same trend. When we leave, although we have some good marks in the 67, 64%, we are declining as we hit middle and high school. And then if you look at the bottom quartile, for the most cases, the green is below the 50% threshold, except for 5th grade within this data set. The next slide is taking out our students with disabilities, and what you will see happen is, our thresholds go up, but you'll still see from elementary going to secondary that we see that decline happening again, and we see that all of our bottom quartile bars are below 50 except for 5th grade. And again, looking at our students with disabilities, this is just the threshold drop completely with, all of those bars being below 50%. The next slide that we're looking at is actually a federal indicator for performance that the federal government uses, and we also use it here in Florida. And this was meant to track all the student groups in our schools. We have the white, black, Hispanic, multiracial, students with disabilities and economically disadvantaged, and English language learners being tracked in the ESSA data index. And what this graph is showing you is that this is a 6-year monitoring period. It started, the first data set was from 18-19. The last data set will be in 25-26. And what the dot is showing you, if we looked at the light blue line, which is our students with disabilities, within that first year that we measured the federal index, 25 of our schools had students with disabilities as a subgroup performing below the federal index of 41%. As you look at each year, you can see how those numbers change. But at this point now, the data from this past school year, which you're seeing marked as 23-24, 37 of our schools have students with disabilities performing below the federal index. And what this means is when you move into, if those 37 schools, if you see that dot go to the 5th year and then the 6th year, all of those schools are designated CS and I, which is the same designation as a D and F school. We don't want that. The goal in monitoring the federal index is to reduce the amount of schools that have subgroups performing below 41%. Right now, this next slide is telling you that 14 of our schools have had this designation with one or more subgroups for 4 years in a row. These are the schools that we need to get off that list, that need to move past that and have advancement in the performance of those students, because we don't want anyone designated CS&I by the 6th year when this data is that end threshold.
So just to pause right there, that is new information that the feds have just brought out. So I just want to take time to process that, if you are on that trajectory of having 6 years below the federal index, you will be designated a comprehensive support and intervention school by the state, which essentially means you will be monitored as if you were a D or an F school by the state.
May I? And this is the number, not percentage. So if I go to this one, it's the number of school, okay?
Yes. And we actually, right after this slide, we have a pause for discussion, just to break up this presentation. But overall, we're obviously seeing that the goal is to increase proficiency and learning gains overall in our district. That is the goal for advancement and to continue to improve and making sure that our students are making a year's worth of growth in a year's worth of time. Definitely focusing on our SWD subgroup. There's a lot of work to be done there. It's folded into the focus framework, but it also, we will be extracting out some other high-level actions that we're going to take, which you'll hear more about, which obviously you've read some of the recommendations in that ESC review. And activating a multitude of those is also going to help improve the instructional outcomes for our students. And then again, as we do impact reviews and we look at the data and we advise and we work with schools, they're planning for those subgroups that are underperforming. Those should be living in those action plans as well. Before we move on, we do have a minute to pause and think and ponder, and Mr. Connor make comments, and anyone have any questions just based on data before we move on.
Mr. Edwards? I'm good right now. Ms. Ziegler?
Well, I know we have more to talk about. I just want to highlight a couple of things. First of all, I thank you for doing this. Thank you. You said January, because it was one of the things that we'd asked about pretty regularly, and you delivered in January, and I know this was a lot of work. And there's a couple of things you stated that I think is really important, and I'm glad you highlighted it. That at the beginning, this is, we've celebrated a lot of great stuff that happens in this district, but there's a lot of opportunity for growth, and this is rolling up our sleeves. And so, but also highlighting that this is not necessarily a reflection on our teachers. This is where we're at, and onward and upward. And I think that's really important, because I think we talked about being vulnerable, but, and I don't want that to get lost in translation at all with any of our teachers, because I know they work incredibly hard. There's a lot of layers to it, but I really appreciate this, and the data helps at least me really look at trends, and this is very helpful, the way you've the way you've actually extrapolated the SWD and then being able to zero in on this. So looking forward to the next step.
Okay. Mr. Enos. Ms. Marinelli.
Thank you. I think it's important that the public knows and everybody here that we are not hiding any data, that there is a problem in regular education students and students with disabilities, and it's being addressed. And our superintendent and all staff, you're addressing it, and you're bringing it to our attention. Never, granted, we haven't had from the feds, but it really puts it in perspective, and it will align with that whole ESE study that was done, and as things go on. So that's another part of the hardwiring, and I think it's so important that we are not hiding anything. And also, I think it was great when you said about the high school and middle school, their content.
Yep.
And they're not reading teachers.
Right.
And they weren't trained to be reading teachers. So it's going to be interesting how that all gets moved in to middle school and high school to address the reading issue.
Yes.
So thank you.
Yes.
Can you just give a example of aligned tiered support?
Yes.
Particularly as it relates to instructional supports and perhaps school counselor supports?
Yes.
And are they both part of that tiered system when a student starts struggling?
Yes. So when we think of the academic aligned tiered supports, we want it to be in alignment with the instructional sequence in the classroom, because when you're talking about students that are already struggling, the last thing you want is to add things that are not related to what they're trying to learn from the teacher. So that support has to be within the same standard, in the same body of knowledge. So if I'm learning about character development and I am reading about the rainforest is not a good one. Charlotte's Web. Let's say I'm reading about Charlotte's Web and I'm learning about character development, and maybe there's some knowledge building from that story that we're learning. You want those aligned supports to feed that. You can still work on other skills and concepts within reading, but working in the same body of knowledge and having a direct connect to that standard connects it for students. Don't expect an at-risk reader to make those connections themselves. So we want to look at, if I taught this and some got it, some didn't, what is my next move? That could be a reteaching the next day. That could be more modeling and direct instruction, more practice with a different task and coaching from the teacher. That can also look like support from a reading coach, support from outside interventionists if we do have them, that are continuing to work with those students in need. So it's core, but there are prescribed aligned tiered supports for a student with disabilities, right? That's always there, feeding the IEP. There's an expectation, but there's also aligned tiered supports that happen outside of that, because not every child has a learning disability, but children access knowledge differently, and we have to scaffold, we have to accelerate, and we have to intervene. And that is what's expected of the classroom teacher. You know, go ahead.
Yeah, it's where data becomes very, very important, because as you identify specific skills that students may be deficient in that are barriers for them mastering standards, that's where the aligned tiered support is. If I have the right data for that student that's individualized, whether it may be through an iReady diagnostic or other tools that we use in the district, I can then work with that student on that specific skill deficit, which is going to shore up, hopefully, for them to be able to perform and be at mastery on core content. So that's where that aligned tiered support is. It's data-driven, it's individualized for that student, and it matches, and to Ms. O'Day's point, it fits within the context of what they're learning at the time.
Just to go on that, does that mean we're changing the practice, or that maybe first step, we're not doing pull-out as much? Because I think there's a lot of conversation about pull-out, and if I'm understanding you correctly and thinking about how that works in the actual classroom of, we're not going to pull them out and have them learn new skills and then be basically more behind with their classroom. Is that?
Well, if you think of elementary as that 120-minute literacy block, all this can occur, right? That first tier one as a whole group, then moving into the differentiated groups that I may have, which could be small group instruction with a teacher, could be working with a blended learning platform, could be practicing a collaborative task with someone else. All of those interactions that students have should be prescribed based on data. So if I need to build my vocabulary, I might be working on a vocabulary task. If I need to work more on the character development side because I'm struggling. There should be an activity and task that students are experiencing. So how you design that core experience is important. But going back to the pulling out or pushing in, 84% of our SWD group is in an inclusion setting. That inclusion setting has one teacher and sometimes two teachers where they're pushing in. We do want to see those supports aligned. We want to see those kids working on tasks that make sense for them, that may be remedial, and then tasks that make sense to them that they're trying to grasp that grade level content, and support from the core teacher in a small group and that ESC assigned teacher as well. So it is a complex moving system. It is. And that's why it's a goal, because I mean, there's a finesse to that. And there's the data you use and the data you don't use, and there's the data you tackle and the data that you're monitoring. And we have to equip everyone to understand those moving parts.
Mr. Edwards.
Bearing in mind that there are no excuses, and our expectations are high for all students.
Yeah.
What my question is, of the 13 schools that you're talking about, do they fall into the category of Title I?
Some do and some don't.
Okay, and what about, because my next question then is, how about dual language? I think that last I remember, there was something like 12 or 13 languages that we're supporting, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and then if some do, some don't, is dual language a factor in this conversation?
Well, the more profound data that in comparison, our Black students and students with disabilities are underperforming, our ELL students are outperforming those groups. So our ELL students actually are not at the most at risk when we look at the data set if we had to prioritize. However, there has to be appropriate ELL strategies in the core classroom and in our aligned supports. So the demographic does matter, and whatever that target is in your school matters to the plan that we deploy.
So I'm asking that question because I know there's no silver bullet here.
Correct.
And I'm appreciative of the fact that we have a benchmark of we've got a lot of work to do. I'm really just trying to understand the components of where we go from here. There isn't a silver bullet, and what are the menu options that we're exploring?
That is what's coming up next, and the goal is to pretty much melt the iceberg because it's big and it's going to take time. That is for sure, but we have to work on the right things at the right time to get there. And we're hoping that what we've been considering and planning towards is going to start doing that for us.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. All right, so moving on and talking more about what kind of things we are considering, what do we want to do to melt that iceberg. Again, I've explained that rope, and we are going to go further into what the engage, empower, and excel means within this rope. That is that balcony level. What is the district doing? What are community partnerships doing? What is the board doing? What is the superintendent doing? How do we make this all happen so high quality literacy instruction can occur in our classrooms? So as you heard in the first part of the presentation, those impact reviews, empower meetings, and our professional learning plan do support this. We are engaging and investing with our schools, those doing the work, and we're also focused on empowering our teachers. Everything we plan is to put resources, support, and tools in their hands through either education or training, and both. And when we look at what happens after that, those blue markers, the strategic plan, community foundation, and collaboration, that's what's happening now. Right? The superintendent has put a framework together for the strategic plan that's coming. One of the pillars is literacy, and a lot of the work that we're doing will be embedded in that. So we have to make sure that our strategic plan is aligned to the needs. We have to make sure that our community partnerships and the things that we're discussing and planning for align to the needs, right? Because it's about doing the right things, not everything. And we want to get to a place of strong, tight alignment together. And then also that collaboration. You know, I've had a great collaborative relationship with the union. They've been lockstep with me on thinking and planning and really understanding and trusting me with the end game that we're here to support teachers. And as we mentioned earlier, at first it did not feel like that, but over time we're hoping that shows, that they see the support, they see the resource, they see the shared ownership. So they've been great in planning that way. But then also our school-based leaders have to trust us, right? Because what we're asking them to do is not less, okay? And change actually requires more work, whether it's going to be less work or more work in the end. The process extends. So they've been great in also planning and thinking, and that's going to be ongoing. So that engagement's really, really powerful because we have to plan for aligned actions. When we're looking at the empower section, this is where the bulk of our work is going to go. How are we empowering everyone to get this work done? It's complex, it's difficult, it's ever-changing, and our infrastructure has to support that. So we're going to talk about how we are investing in our teachers with the work that we are planning at this time. So when we think high-impact resources, the first thing is, if I'm in the classroom, I need the right tools and resources. There's an opportunity to refresh this. And the first thing we have to do is think about those Tier 2 and Tier 3 resources. Are they aligned to the science of reading? Is it bringing the best practice, feasible practice in place for what I'm working with in my school in Sarasota County? Our curriculum directors and our program specialists and chiefs are looking at all of that right now and already have made decisions about what they want to sunset and what things that they are considering purchasing. And we're giving Bonnie a very hefty list of, it's a wish list. And she's been great in allocating resources and making sure what we need to budget the important supports that we need to put in teachers' hands. But anything that we do purchase is going to come with professional learning. And again, it's not doing everything, it's doing the right things and making sure that we're targeting the right resources to do that work that they need to get done. Something that came out was this is a big one, access points classrooms. This is our students who are not on standard curriculum, who are intellectually disabled, and we need a high quality core instructional resource for those teachers. There are some pilots in place, and we are looking at making some decisions regarding where we're going, but we will be supplying them with high quality core instructional resources to advance those students' work. We're going to replicate and scale some great pilots. We also have the University of South Florida Literacy Initiative, or not South Florida, University of Florida Literacy Initiative. Sorry, UF, University of Florida Literacy Initiative. They're doing a lot of great work with the science of reading and producing resources, training, and frameworks for us. And we have schools in elementary that are piloting the foundational skills program to intervene on those gaps that we talked about in Scarborough's ROPE. And we also have a small group framework for the classroom teachers to work kids through, not only getting that high quality instruction on reading, direct instruction, but also the progress monitoring that goes with it. So that's a great program. What's great about this is that our teachers were asking for this, and the district responded with a pilot, but really that was a great target, and that's something we're going to expand for K through 2. We want everyone to have access and support to utilize these new resources and refresh that foundational skills approach in our K2 classrooms.
Just as a side note, when you think about big box publishers, this is a fraction of the cost. So that's great. It's research that's out of the University of Florida based on the science of reading, and there is some cost if we're going to buy some of the supplemental materials with it, but at a fraction of what you would get in most big name publishers.
Yeah. And a lot of our resources that we use for phonics instruction over the past few years through some of the grants that have come out through the state, the elementary team was buying Elcone boxes and buying different things that go along with those programs. So like Mr. Connor said, we won't have to really extend that far to make that happen, which is excellent. The next part is intensive reading, and this is near and dear to our middle and high school teams' hearts right now. They know walking classrooms and working with teachers that this is an area we have to invest in, not only invest in the resource, but the training, because as we've said, those teachers are doing what they were trained to do, content, and we have to supply them with the strategies that are research-based, that work, and that are feasible to do with our secondary students. That comes with a refresh on those resources. And what we're doing in middle and high is going to be a little bit different because of where middle school was in this progression. They did launch a resource last year that they're going to continue to build on, but we're going to add to that to continue to enhance that plan that has been designed by Sue Meckler and the team. And then we're looking at high school and completely replacing that intensive reading resource. And so we have already met with vendors, and the team is continuing to vet and plan and think. They're actually visiting another district to see some of this in action. So a lot of deep thinking regarding what is it that is going to be better and that we can train together on to really get lift in our intensive reading middle and high school classrooms. When we think about ESC, self-contained ESC classrooms are ASD self-contained or behavior support self-contained, and we talked about access points. But again, looking at how we're supporting those teachers through a curriculum framework, because they are multi-grade level classrooms. That is a different ballgame. And you can't just take the core curriculum and make that work. So that was called out in the ESC review, and they were right, and we will be working towards that. That is a long-term plan. And then our inclusion classrooms. Again, 84% of those students are in our gen ed classroom, which is exactly where they need to be, and that's excellent. But what kind of scaffolding and what kind of infrastructure is there to sustain them accessing that grade level content at a higher rate? So those are the things that we're looking at there. And then we're looking into the redesigning and aligning of resources. We are completely revamping our ESC staffing allocation. That has been a lot of deep, hard work. It did start in October. It definitely got more push in November when we had our program review, and that team has been working very diligently on a very comprehensive plan. Again, the next step there is to get feedback from a variety of stakeholders to make sure that we've considered all that needs to be considered with equipping our schools and our district with the right staffing to do the work. And this staffing really lies more heavy on how we're supporting schools versus the district staff. So I do want to make that clear. That revision is very much in support of schools and having school-based staff in schools doing that work with our special needs students. Our ELO program is under revamp as well. So all of that is happening. I'm telling you about a lot of things because my goal is that as we have it solidified, we bring it and we talk. But those are things that are going to impact the overall outcomes for our students' literacy. We did have grants come across our desk very, very quickly with very, very short turnaround times, but we took advantage of completing those grant applications, each for $1.5 million. The Stronger Connections grant is targeting our ELL families, and we did write that budget narrative to increase those supports there. And then our Bureau of School Improvement grant was written to target a lot of the ESC work we need to do. Training, resources, summer institute for ESC teachers, writing curriculum, writing training. We have a lot built into that that we're hoping we do receive that grant of $1.5 million. That will provide us a lot of funding towards our ESC review and also addressing our literacy initiatives there. We should know about that hopefully this month.
And board members, you have a copy of those grant narratives in your packet. So if you want to go through that, read through it, you'll see what was proposed.
Yes. And then again, going into the instructional frameworks and making sure that we're removing and sunsetting programs and practices that are not aligned to the science of reading, but investing in our teachers to teach them the new approaches, the new pedagogy. We can't expect people to shift if they haven't been trained and provided the resources. So we're going to do that in a thoughtful, timely manner so that when the shifts do occur, that the implementation is strong. So we're working on that as well. The next section is going to speak heavily on a coaching initiative that we have, and it's going to focus on making sure that we are providing high quality supports to our teachers. And this is not a reading recovery presentation, but we have to touch upon reading recovery to talk about what is coming next because there's going to be shiftings and changes that do impact the program. So our goal, this is a slide with a lot of words, so I'm going to summarize this. This is really focusing on two things. Focusing on continuing to fill the bucket with high quality core instruction, empowering teachers in the classroom that are working with the students with reading, that are responsible for not only good high quality core instruction, but the aligned tiered supports. Additionally, that comes with thinking of a coaching program. This literacy specialist would be in K through 12 classrooms or schools and in classrooms working with teachers that are teaching reading, being a thought partner, being a coach, being a professional developer, being someone that can work with students, work with families, but a literacy specialist in all of our schools to help us really galvanize the work that needs to be done and move the needle, and most importantly, support teachers through the complex work that they have to do. We have to equip them for that work, and we have not quite hit the mark there with equipping our teachers so far in this district with literacy. The intervention program is where we need it. Right, an interventionist, yes, that is helpful for students that are at risk, and the different ways to identify that vary, and that does help undercut at-risk readers. It's not something that you need everywhere, and you do need it in pockets, so we're not saying that that is not needed. It is needed, and we want that to stay in place, but there are some shifts and changes that we want to explore with expanding the role of interventionists. So in speaking towards reading recovery, what I want to say to this, again, this is not a reading recovery presentation, but it does come into play here. And we're very, very proud of all of the teachers, administrators, district staff, and community partners that made this a possibility in our schools, that worked through this process for 8 years passionately and very dedicated to giving our students the very best. And we're also very proud of the work that it produced. Over time, it did touch over 8 years, 1,963 students. And of those students, we had a high return on their progress coming out of first grade. When you look at the school year cohort of 2021, 62% of those students were proficient or higher on the third grade FAST assessment, and then also tracking first grade retentions that did reduce. So we are proud of that work, and that all the students that benefited from that, and the students that will be in it through the remainder of the year. But as we expand, we have a call to action to expand our reach and to make sure that we are getting to more than just first graders. Our first graders here, when we look at what potential limitations reading this program was putting in place. Again, you heard that it's 300 students about each year. That would be anywhere between 8 and 10 students per teacher per year. And that was in a one-on-one model with a reading recovery framework and resources. And that touches about 1.8% of the elementary population when we look at just the sheer numbers of that program and how it supported those students. But what we want to be able to do is really attack our gap. And we have to be able to expand the reach of interventionists. We have to be able to invest in our teachers, because they are the ones teaching reading every single day. And they need the skills, they need the resources, they need the follow-up, the follow-through from us as a district and our school-based teams to make sure that they can meet the needs of students. So we will be moving in that direction to expand what interventionist means, and we will be looking at employing reading coaches in our classrooms K through 12. And you can see this slide is really just talking again about the data, and it's reviewing, the 38% of third graders at a level 1 and level 2. It's reviewing the 41% of our 10th graders at a level 1 and level 2 as referenced by PM3 last year, and also looking at the ESSA subgroup data. And our elementary schools have a higher rate of students under that federal index. So when we think of resources, the goal is 2 areas of focus. One is to ensure we're building capacity of teachers. At the very first pass, everything has to invest in their classroom, their resources, their training, and their skills. And number 2 is making sure that they're able to provide those aligned tiered supports, even if there's not an interventionist or a resource teacher involved. So that requires us to rededicate the funds and take those funds and employ reading coaches K through 12, so that we have that point person in the school to grow and develop our teachers, to push into those classrooms, to co-teach, to pull a small group, to provide professional learning, to lead that advanced progress monitoring and engage in that deep decision making and thinking, so our teachers could advance the learning of those students that are in front of them every single day. That is what our goal is with our literacy coach initiative. And then we want to expand where we have the funds and we have the need for interventionists. We want to expand what interventionists are doing. Interventionists should be able to work with what is prescribed within that school and in that district as a student population in need, and they should be highly skilled to be able to layer in there. And when we have data, we want to respond to data regularly to provide that intense intervention intervention, and we want those interventions to be aligned to the science of reading. So those are the changes we're going to be making to that role, and we want interventionists in more than just our early grades. We have a need everywhere, and we have to be able to expand the reach as far as we can with the resources that we have. So that is the work that we're doing behind the scenes to think about literacy coaches, interventionists, and how this falls into our Literacy for All initiative. It's going to be just as rigorous as reading recovery. A literacy coach has to be highly skilled and highly trained, and we're going to be training them. We already have a literacy coach pilot in our district right now. Those are ESSER-funded positions, and they're only in elementary school. And we are looking to keep that and grow that practice in our middle and high schools. But our state is offering a lot of awesome resources right now with literacy coach endorsement that is free. It's rigorous training that we're going to set our literacy coaches up to do and complete. It's also offering a ton of micro-credentialing that is aligned to the science of reading. Again, recognizing that this body of research says one thing, but preparing our teachers to do it is a completely it's completely different. And not every district has the same capacity to make that happen. So no matter what the capacity of the district, there is a ton of resources and training that we're going to be pulling in and setting people up for success for. The micro-credentialing also comes with stipends upward between $1,000 and $2,000 that teachers can get to learn these new practices and skills. And then we are going to make sure that we are having them with us every month. Literacy coaches will report to the district every month, and we will look at data. We will engage in research. We will deploy supports and practices and problem solve every single month to make sure that they're equipped to lead the work in their school in partnership with their leadership teams and their teachers. The interventionist cadre is similar but different because our coaches are going to focus heavily on empowering our teachers. They're still going to pull small group, but there is more of a prevalence with working with the teacher. That is the primary role of the coach, but they will also work with at-risk students, whereas the interventionist is going to be focused just on that student group. And so the literacy coach endorsement won't be a part of the criteria, but understanding and credentialing in dyslexia, understanding our district screening process, engaging in the science of reading, professional learning, which comes from micro-credentialing and other opportunities. And then they will also report to the district, to the elementary team, middle school and high school team. Again, problem solving, working and growing together. So we're very, very responsive to the data and the needs of each school. So how do we excel through all of this? We excel by implementing, monitoring, and supporting. We're going to do this work in phases. We've already started it. You've heard about impact reviews. You've heard about empower meetings. You've heard about our PD. There's a lot more that we didn't even share about advanced progress monitoring, the data work we're doing with our leaders in our schools, but they're already engaged. We are now trying to align the resources that we put in front of those doing this work, and also the supports and professional learning that come with that, which comes with parts of the plan that you just heard. And that takes us to the end of this portion of the presentation. Again, I know this was a lot, and there are so many different things we can go into, and we're happy to do so at this time. My whole team is here. I'm here to answer questions, Mr. Connor. And again, if there's a need for more, we will incorporate that into upcoming workshops or one-on-one board meetings.
Mr. Edwards?
Sure. You like starting with me, yeah? There is a lot there. And I guess a couple of concerns that I have. I am the guy that's been asking for improvement of programs and making programs go away that become obsolete or are not successful, or subscriptions that we no longer need. So I'm all for continuous improvement. In terms of reading recovery, I certainly understand the expense associated with one-on-one intervention. But I also understand that we had a multitude of parents who came in and spoke highly and are grateful for the program and the changes that happened for their children. And I guess what I haven't heard is, and I'm prepared to move on. I get it. I haven't heard any real solid data that says where we're headed with these coaches and interventionists, what that data is and how successful it is. I understand that there's money available and that we're all moving there. But it seems like I'm flying a bit without a net, that we're going to go in this direction, and yet we don't know what that data, or at least you haven't shared it. So I'm concerned a bit about something completely going away that's successful until we're sure that where we're going is the right choices.
Okay, so the Reading Recovery Program isn't casting a wide enough net. We are meeting with around 300 students a year, which equated to 1,900 students over 8 years. And that was determined by their at-risk indicators, which did not allow for students with disabilities to be a part of that work or students that were retained to be a part of that work. And if students were within that work that presented a flag where this program wasn't working, they were exited, which is getting a little bit more into the technicality of it. But what we're saying with this program is that it's not meeting the needs of enough. With an adult and one-on-one, the research about small group and one-on-one, they rival each other. You can still have impact with small group versus a one-on-one, and there's more than just this program to get more done for more students, and that's the impetus for switching.
And I can intellectualize that. Then let me try it another way.
Okay.
We have reading coaches already, and they're supported by ESSER dollars.
Correct.
What kind of results have we had from those folks?
Well, they're in their first year, and remember, measuring how a teacher's practice improves is different than measuring a number on a test, or a number on a screener, or a number on a beginning, middle, and end gauge for performance of a student. But what we are doing is when you invest in the teacher, that teacher's data and the amount of students that are becoming closer to proficiency or making a year's worth of growth, that data should improve.
Okay. And
But to your point, I'd be happy to give you a progress monitoring plan for the plan. So part of this is explaining where the vision is and where we're going, because we are in the middle of this work. This is not done. And there's a lot of details that come into play with getting all of this done in a phased process that makes sense, that is going to work for this district. Part of that is a progress monitoring tiered support plan. We have that. Ms. Beachy and Ms. Minnelli are actually working on that, and we can, again, there's so much more to talk about, and we can go deeper into that because those metrics will be available.
okay, so I trust Mr. Connor. I trust you.
Yeah.
So that's not what's at question here. I just feel like it's seeming that we're moving into this, to the thrust of this direction, and I understand we only have X amount of dollars and we have to figure out how to spend them correctly. So again, I have been that person that is been asking for those programs. I just want to have a little bit better of here's the goal, here's what it's based on. That's just me, and it doesn't have to happen today. But I'm sharing with you that what we have isn't working, but we have to make sure that we're betting correctly on where we're going.
Yeah, and it's expanding the resources for teachers, because what's not working is not empowering teachers.
Okay.
With resources, training, support, coaching, and intervention where it's needed. So it is a big shift, and I understand that, and I appreciate the questions, and I'd be happy to follow up at any time one-on-one, or if the board has a desire for a workshop on reading recovery, we'd be happy to do that as well.
Yeah, I've been behind the glass. I've get all that. I think where I'm more interested, for me personally, is having what the goals are in the new program. And I understand, they are nothing but goals, but what the goals are and what it's based on.
Sure.
Okay.
I can flesh that out more for you. Thanks. You're welcome.
So,
Ziegler?
I'm very excited. So I'm speechless. A couple different things. I recognize where you're coming from, and I think that, and I did ask Mr. Connor similar to that, just in the broader goals. When we look at the timeline, we were talking about strategic plan, our evaluation, moving into next year, and making sure we're lining up. And so I would assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but because I do agree that we don't want to fall into the same trap that has been in the past. If we don't put identifiable goals in place for whatever new systems or processes or professional development strategies that we're putting in place, then we have no way to really evaluate it. So, and that has been the case prior to, where I think we found ourselves feeling like it wasn't right. The data's illustrating like our proficiencies are low, but there was not a connection. And so is that something that we would be
Yeah,
looking at?
so here's where we're at. When you move at an aggressive pace and you're pushing yourself up against a new school year, there is so many moving parts in terms of staffing, budgeting. So you're kind of getting the cart before the horse, right? We're working and developing a strategic plan that's going to include exactly what you're talking about. What are our literacy goals by grade level? How are we going to get there? What are those supports? What are the action steps? All of that should lend itself towards improved outcomes. And for me, the goal is to give you a 5-year projection. Because moving literacy, when you move at scale a district, you should expect 1% improvement a year. You're not going to move literacy 5. Show me a district where you move 5 points in 1 year at a district level. Schools can move at 5 when you talk about that scale. So we look at a 5-year projection, and I think that's where you're driving at. While that's happening and we're looking at refreshing the strategic plan, things have to move now because we are coming up on staffing allocations and we're talking with the union and all those processes that have to set us up for success for there. So yes, I can see that that's a little bit of the unknown right now, being that we're moving and we've got things working, and then the plan itself is being solidified altogether, because I want to bring to the board a comprehensive strategic plan versus just here's one piece of it, here's another piece of it. So
well, and I think that's important. I wrote that down. I mean, similar to what we were talking about before, it's evaluating while implementing it at the same time, because it's not like everything's static where we can just press pause. You guys evaluate. I mean, I'm sure you'd love that, but when we were talking about different reading initiatives and just evaluating, I know that what my question was, because I am not an educator and don't understand all the variables, but understood like science of reading, structured literacy, leveled literacy. There's a variety of them. So where are we, and what have we moved? So I think that, and that's very much what I am taking away from this. But I also, so I know we had that conversation. I just wanted to highlight that because I agree, and I believe that's coming. I think that it really is interesting. I highlighted also something that I have asked for a really long time is as we evaluate our budget processes, so people in the public know that budgeting is ongoing. You know, Bonnie, as soon as they close the books, they open it back up and start all again. And to line up positions and budgets with the academic needs is very exciting to hear. Very exciting to hear. And, you know, I share the aspect. I think a lot of us have said, we want to evaluate what's working, what's not working. And sometimes flipping a switch, as if I could have, flipped a switch and say, we want science of reading, et cetera, because there's data over here that illustrates that. I know that takes time and it's a phased approach, but I in my experience, I think you guys are moving aggressively fast. And I like that, but not recklessly. So I'm very encouraged by this. But I'm excited to see what those metrics are and whatever we can do to continue to support those things to be successful. So.
And just reinforcing, as a board, we have continually asked, which is obviously happening, the return on the investment within the perimeters of the budget and our partnerships in the community. Is it working? How many students is it impacting? And how do we improve the results for the students that have been in that gap for far too long without improvements? Mr. Enos?
So what I heard is we're going to be going up 5 points per year, starting this year, is kind of what I heard. Correct, Mr. Connor? Anyway, I think it's amazing work, because ultimately when you look at it, I'm all about consistency, policy, procedure, all of the little pieces. Is I think that when you look at it and you look at everything that you've already presented today, as well as you're looking at expanding the literacy as talking to teachers, especially at the high school level, they're looking for other avenues in order to, because they can see it and then what they have, and then making it to the budget, to Mrs. Ziegler's point, that now we can buy product that we know is successful and effective, that we go to Mr. Edwards' point, then having the data to be able to back it up, so that if we need to, we can move and we can pivot to have the learning community, to have the principals, the competition, the professional development. I mean, hats off. I think this is something that I know that I haven't seen in a long time at the Sarasota County School District. And I think that's very, very refreshing, especially to be able to do that, because ultimately we are accounted, and our mission is to make our kids smarter in the education of our community, so we become the best community to live in, which ultimately we already do. But this is just, again, this just makes it a point that we're just getting there at 10 points per year. That's what I'm shooting for. But at the end of the day, I just think it's amazing, and hats off to your team, and hats off, Mr. Connor. I mean, really, when you look at it, I'm all about looking at the little minutia of how does it all fit in and the consistencies, and being consistent is always will lead to success. And that's where, you know, as in, you know, the reading recovery, it's just the same thing. Opening it up to more people, it's only going to be a win, even though we know that it's been successful for those 300. So it sounds like modeling that, which is what it says in there, modeling that to increase that. I mean, that's, you know, hats off. I think it was really an amazing presentation today about just showing all the little pieces, and that's really where it's going to get us to what we wanted to be. I know as this board member, the reason why I got on the board. So thank you both.
If you can just clarify, what I was hearing is that that reading recovery was serving one segment of the population, leaving out other segments, but within the reading recovery results, that 62% were it had an impact on.
Yeah, the last cohort that took the PM, the last cohort that had data from the last time we pulled that data, 62% of them scored a 3 or higher.
So we had 38% that of those students that it didn't.
Well, that program wasn't working with those students. So these were just first graders that are not learning disabled, that are not retained students based on their selection process. So in the goal to expand that interventionist approach where needed, but then investing in our teachers through the literacy coach is meant to impact more.
Well, and I think that's an important piece, because I'm with the parents that loved reading recovery. Obviously, it made a difference in their child's lives. As a board, we're accountable for every student to be able to be literate and academically successful. Ms. Marinelli?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with what my fellow board members have said. The one thing that caught my eye, or when you were talking about our ESE students, and we have the primary of our students are in inclusion, and yes, that's where we want them to be. But obviously, in the last 7 years, with that model, we haven't seen the growth. And I'm not being critical, because I know our teachers are working very hard. And talking with some ESE teachers, this is a frustration for them too, because they're working so hard. But I think because we've gotten where the IEP, that first word is individual, and that IEP has to drive how kids receive their instruction. So I know you all are going to be looking at that to make sure where we have the students that is the appropriate setting, and then working very closely with the parents when those IEPs are done, and having it be addressed through their reading and their individual needs. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Wonderful. This is one of the most important workshops I've had the opportunity to participate in. Everything is codependent on a student's ability to read. And when we start moving into content areas of science, social studies, a good deal of math without having those grade level skills, we are going to leave students behind. So I compliment you, Superintendent Connor. You're doing an absolutely fabulous job, Mrs. O'Day, and your team. I haven't been this excited in several years.
I do just want to say thank you to my team, my chiefs of elementary, middle, and high, Jennifer, Brandon, and Megan, and then Amy, Sue, and Michelle, and their program specialists. The work that they're doing is amazing, and lifting this and bringing it to life and supporting our school-based teams in getting this work done. Can't do it without them, so thank you, guys.
Thank you. That concludes our workshop for today. We will resume for our regularly scheduled school board meeting at 6 o'clock this evening. Member comments? We'll start with you, Mr. Edwards.
There's a shocker. I hate to bring this up, but I must. Florida House. It's still there. It's still unoccupied. We terminated a lease well over a year ago. My understanding was the board asked Mr. Connor to investigate working with the proposed new occupant. That doesn't seem to be an opportunity. So since we're well beyond the lease, I would hate to see the Florida House fall into complete disrepair. We have a farm program that we would like to invest in. Have a trades academy that there's so much opportunity that and all we have to really do, according to my understanding, is to let the commission know that they're beyond the lease. The law says that it could be ours. If we all agree, it could be ours. And then we could give it to Mr. Connor to use for the benefit of our students. And so I am recommending that we let Mr. Connor pursue that with our attorney and find out a way to get Florida House to be ours.
And Mrs. Ziegler?
Anytime this comes up, I know Jody knows, Mr. Dumas knows, I'm like, I'm indifferent, but I don't disagree. My biggest look at is, what does it mean for us operationally? Does it provide us an academic opportunity, as we've discussed? Then naturally, if we're beyond the lease, my question is from a risk management standpoint of, what does that look like? Are they carrying, are we exposed or are we in compliance? Because if there were any kind of issue, burglary, injury, whatever, I'm concerned about that. It may not be an issue. I'm just saying, just when I hear that we're in this kind of limbo. So I don't stand very strong on either aspect outside of it. If it makes sense for us academically and you guys are prepared to do it, because we've got a lot of heavy lifting right now. At the same token, I will say on the record that I wanted to play nice in the sandbox with everyone. I know Mr. Dumas knew that I said that. I feel a little discouraged with where we're at now, because I feel like it was kind of, I don't think that was reciprocated. I'll say that. I don't think that was reciprocated to the board. And in a kind of a, now you guys deal with it kind of way, hoping for a win-win. I don't know where we're at right now, but I'm indifferent outside of ensuring our financial situation and exposures are taken care of. And if there's a way to utilize it that's not going to be a strain academically, and you guys are prepared to execute that, then you have my support. I just haven't really heard that yet.
Mr. Enos.
I would say the same thing. I mean, either they need to remove it or we need to get it. I mean, at this point, because the liability is, you know, if it catches on fire, anything. We just need to, I think at the end of the day, either whatever happens, and I'm full support of having Mr. Connor and legal coming up with a decision to be able to present back, because I mean, we've been negotiating this for a long time, and I agree.
Ms. Marinelli. Okay, any further comments? Okay, we're concluding this.
So we're going to get some kind of
I think I've got
some
consensus.
resolution.
I got
He's
consensus.
the consensus, and he has his notes, and I'm sure we will hear. We are concluding the workshop, and we'll resume at 6 o'clock for our regularly scheduled board meeting. Thank you very much to all.